Okay, could we make a start, please? And if we could have our speakers up on the platform, just to make the rest of us feel less lonely. Okay, we have interpretation this morning, as you will see, in many different languages, including Turkish on number 25, Kurdish on 26, and then the other numbers you will see. Okay, for those who need their headphones. So, good morning, everybody. I apologise for the late start, but we've been having some technical problems with one of the presentations. So we have co-chairs this morning. My name is Jean Lambert. I am a member of the European Parliament. As you will hear, I am from the UK, so I am currently in my final few months in this Parliament, and it's a pleasure to be back with this particular topic and conference. I will say now that I must apologise, I have to leave early to go and do some media things. We're finding that suddenly there are journalists who are interested in British members in the European Parliament now that it looks as if we're leaving, who never bothered with our existence before. So this is one of life's ironies. And with my co-chair this morning, is Gökay Akbulut from Germany. We are presenting the panel on the Middle East, on the regional and international conflicts and connotations. And we want to say at the beginning here, one of our speakers is missing this morning. No, well, there's you, but there's another one. There's one who's missing from the platform and one who is missing from the Parliament. And the one who is missing from the Parliament is Mr. Zubeyir Aydar. And apparently Parliament's authorities said last night that he would not be permitted into the Parliament today for security reasons. I want to say that those of us who are members of this Parliament and involved with this conference are very angry about that, and will be making representations to the President of the Parliament for an explanation and why, one, we were notified so late, and two, what is behind this decision. So we will be taking that up because we consider that this was an important invitation, an important intervention, and that we have the right as parliamentarians to invite Mr. Aydar from the KNK as a speaker. So I want to say that now. His intervention will be read by one of our colleagues later this morning. Okay, so shall we hand over? Gökay, do you want to introduce the first speaker?
Ja, guten Morgen, auch von meiner Seite, ruhig weich. Es geht weiter mit unserem dritten Panel heute. Und ich möchte auch noch mal die Vorgehensweise heute Herrn Zubeyir Aydar nicht hier reinzulassen, einfach verurteilen. Das ist absolut untragbar, wie hier agiert wird. Und wir fordern die Verantwortlichen hier entsprechend Position zu beziehen und den Sachverhalt auch aufzuklären. Ja, wir haben verschiedene Redner heute hier mit auf dem Podium. Ich darf zum einen ganz herzlich begrüßen Herrn Kinoshita Akinobu von der Japanisch-Kurdischen Freundschaftsgruppe aus Japan. Wir freuen uns, dass er gestern und heute hier ist. Das ist für uns natürlich auch ein sehr, sehr exotischer Freundschaftsgruppe. Aber Das ist natürlich auch sehr, sehr besonders. Es gibt ja weltweit überall verschiedene Freundschaftsgruppierungen mit den Kurdinnen und Kurden, und deswegen freuen wir uns ganz besonders, dass er heute hier ist. Des Weiteren darf ich auf meiner linken Seite vorstellen Herrn Ahmet Yildirim, ehemaliger Abgeordneter der HDP aus der Türkei. Auch schön, dass Sie heute unter uns sind. Und ich darf auch ganz herzlich begrüßen Herrn Bill Park, Junior-Dozent am Institut für Verteidigungsstudien aus dem King's College aus Großbritannien. Er wird in seinem Part über die Rolle von Regionalmächten in dem Konflikt einen Beitrag bringen. Außerdem darf ich auch ganz herzlich begrüßen Herrn Michael Gunter von EUTCC Sekretariat aus den USA. Er wird in seinem Beitrag über die NATO und den Mittleren Osten referieren, über die Krise und Konsolidierung. Zu guter Letzt sollte Herr Zubeyir Aydar auch mit hier sitzen und einen Beitrag über die NATO und die Entwicklung in den Mittleren Osten bringen, von Faktor der Instabilität zum Faktor der Stabilität in Bezug auf die kurdische Bewegung. Leider ist er verhindert worden, und wir werden dann Frau Dersim Dadevden noch hier haben. Ich darf jetzt das Wort übergeben an Herrn Akinobu.
失礼しました。まずこの学会を開いていただきました関係者、各位の皆様および団体の関係者の方々に御礼申し上げます。私は英語をうまく使いこなせないものですからプレゼンテーションで、スライドで見ていただけるようにお願いしたいと思います。どうかご理解していただければと思います。もう言いました。前段言いました。日本人わかりですか？
Es gibt ein kleines technisches Problem.
I don't know if the system is functioning now. You have an English translation.
No, there's no interpretation in Japanese.
No, but we just
Answer.
gave English translation in order for them to read parallelly.
Also die Übersetzer müssten eine Übersetzung bekommen haben in verschiedenen Sprachen von dem Beitrag. Oder in Englisch.
Translated version, yeah. Yeah.
I thought that's what this guy is for.
So is there someone else who can speak Japanese?
Well, the guy with him does, but apparently the translated version has not been given to the interpreters yet. They don't have it yet.
They certainly know. Most people but in China, yeah.
No? They don't have it. Should we move to the second speech and while we sort?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, dann wir machen weiter erstmal mit dem zweiten Beitrag, bis wir die Übersetzungsproblematik geklärt haben. Und ich darf dann jetzt an Herrn Yildirim übergeben. Evet, o şey sorunu çözene kadar.
Teşekkür ederim. Ben de hem buraya konuşmaya gelen diğer konuklarımızı hem siz değerli izleyenleri, dinleyenleri, salonda hazır bulunanları, basın emekçilerini saygıyla selamlıyorum. Açıkçası jeopolitik konusu dünyanın birçok yeri için çok farklı tartışmaları içeren bir konu. Dünyanın her yerinin sosyolojik ve coğrafik olarak belli farkındalıkları vardır. Zaten jeopolitik dediğimiz konu da bir farkındalıkla kazanılan belli avantajlar gibi görülse de bunlar bazen dezavantajları da avantajlarla birlikte kendi içinde barındırıyor. Yine dünyada en fazla jeopolitiği tartışılan alanlardan biri tartışmasız Orta Doğu'dur. Ancak hani Orta Doğu açısından bunu özellikle ifade etmek gerekirse sadece sanayi devriminden sonra önem kazanmış olan enerji kaynakları üzerinden değerlendirmek, Orta Doğu'nun jeopolitiğini biraz daraltmak, biraz sığlaştırmak anlamına gelir. Jeopolitik konusu Orta Doğu'da ele alınırsa en az 12-13 bin yıllık bir süreç ve tarihsel bağlamıyla birlikte ele alınmalı. Çünkü Orta Doğu sadece yeraltı zenginlik kaynaklarıyla önem kazanmış ve bu sebeple çatışmaların veya mücadele alanlarının parçası olmuş bir coğrafya değildir. Neolitik devrimden beri bütünüyle dünyada özellikle ele geçirilmek istenen buradaki açığa çıkarılan kültür hazinesinden istifade edilmek üzere büyük mücadelelerin olduğu bir saha. Unutulmamalı ki adına bugün Orta Doğu diye tariflediğimiz yer tarihsel süreç içerisinde Mezopotamya olarak anılır. Dicle Fırat nehirleriyle birlikte buradaki coğrafik birçok öznel koşul burayı dünyanın diğer yerlerinden farklı kılmış ve birçok insanlık tarihinde ilklerin yaşandığı alan olmuş. Şöyle ki dünyada yerleşik yaşama ilk geçilen, dünyada tarım devriminin ilk yapıldığı, dünyada hayvanın ilk evcilleştirildiği, dünyada bir arada yaşama kültürüne, avcılık toplayıcılıktan sonra bir arada yaşama kültürüne ilk geçilen yer. Bunun da belli coğrafik sebepleri vardır. Birincisi Kuzey Afrika ile Kafkasya, Batı dünyasıyla Doğu dünyası arasındaki kavşak nokta. Bu sadece işte insanların geçiş güzergahını içinde barındıran bir alan değil. Bunun yanı sıra unutulmamalı ki özellikle hayvanların da geçiş, mevsimler arasındaki geçiş güzergahı üzerinde olması sebebiyle insan yaşamını kolaylaştıran bir öğe. Yine çok önemli iki nehir, Dicle ve Fırat ve bu su boylarında açığa çıkmış olan kültür devrimi. Yine bunun yanı sıra özellikle klimatik yani iklim koşulları. Şimdi Mezopotamya özellikle Orta ve Yukarı Mezopotamya'dan kuş uçuşu 100 kilometre güneye gittiğinizde aşırı sıcak koşullardan ötürü yaşam şansınız zorlaşıyor. 100-150 kilometre kuzeye doğru gittiğinizde ise özellikle maksimal soğuk koşullardan ötürü yaşam zorlaşıyor. Yukarı Mezopotamya'daki bu optimal iklim koşulları her zaman insanlık tarihi için bazı değerlerin açığa çıkarıldığı ve kültür devriminin gerçekleştiği bir saha. Bu tarihsel bağlamıyla birlikte belki Orta Doğu'yu ele almak anlamlı ve değerli olacak. Ama bundan daha ötesini herhalde ayrıntılandırmak buranın değil bir bilimsel etkinliğin ve tartışmanın konusu olsa gerek. Ama Orta Doğu'nun özellikle jeopolitiği şununla ilişkilendirilmeli. Binlerce yıldır Kürtler şu Mezopotamya'nın özellikle Dicle ve Fırat'ın doğduğu yerlerden Basra Körfezi'ne dökülmeden önceki 80 kilometre önceki bölüme kadar yoğunlukla yaşadığı yerler. Kürtlerin sürekli binlerce yıldır etkinlik gösterdiği bir saha burası. Orta ve Yukarı Mezopotamya. Yani nehirlerin doğduğu yerden iki nehrin birleştiği ve denize dökülmeden önceki 80 kilometre önceki Şatul Arab'a kadar Kürtlerin çok yoğun yaşadığı bir saha. Ve tarihsel süreç içerisinde de burada hem siyasal hem sosyolojik etkinlikleri çok güçlü Kürtlerin. Buradan da ele aldığımızda bu 10 binlerce yıllık bir tarihle örtüştürüldüğünde Orta Doğu'da olan bitenlere özellikle dünyanın diğer yerlerindeki siyasi yapıların ve sosyolojik zümrelerin ilgisi de ve buraya dair emelleri de her zaman diri olmuştur. Yoksa Orta Doğu'daki petrolü getirip işte sadece sanayi devrimi ve ondan sonraki finans, kapital ve bugünkü neoliberal politikalarla sınırlamak, olayı alabildiğine daraltmak ve tarihsel köklerinden koparmak anlamına gelir. Buradan hareketle Batı dünyasının özellikle 200 yıllık ilgisi, Orta Doğu'ya olan ilgisi, Mezopotamya'ya olan ilgisi başlı başına bir hususu ortaya koymaktadır. Batı bugün Orta Doğu'daki kaosun, çatışmalı ortamın çözüm tarafı değildir. Tarihsel sebep tarafıdır. Yani Batı bugün Orta Doğu'nun özgürlük, barış havarisi falan değildir. Avrupa ve Amerika ve dünyanın süper güçleri tarihsel olarak Orta Doğu'nun bugüne gelmesinin 100-150 yıl önceden başlamak üzere tarihsel sebebidir. Düşünün, bundan bir ay önce 30 Ekim 2018'de 70 dünya lideri Paris'te buluştular. Neymiş? Birinci Dünya Savaşı'nın sona erdiği gün, Mondros'un tarihsel 100. yıl dönümünde. Ve oradan barış mesajları verdiler. Çok iyi bir iş yapılmış gibi. Ama ünlü tarihçi David Fromkin çok evvelinden söylemişti. Barışa son veren barıştır orası. Orta Doğu halklarının vicdanında 100 yıldır mahkum olmuş sınırların çizildiği bir barıştır o. Buradan bakıldığında Batı'nın Orta Doğu'ya çözüm değil çözümsüzlük, sonuç değil sebepten müdahil olma halini göz önünde bulundurmalıyız. Son siyasal gelişmelerle birlikte ele aldığımızda gerek Sayın Öcalan'ın üzerindeki tecritin sebebi olarak Avrupa, kıta Avrupa'sının ve onun siyasi temsilcilerinin, gerekse Arap Baharı'nın son halkası olarak adlandırılan 7 yıllık Suriye'deki 8. yılına giriyoruz bir ay sonra. Suriye'deki çatışmalı ortamın hiçbir zaman çözüm gücü olmadılar. Avrupa'nın özellikle Suriye'de ve Orta Doğu jeopolitiğindeki müdahil olma halinin 100 yılın sonunda geldiği nokta iki açıdan ele alınabilir. Bazı rejimleri ve Türkiye'deki despotik tek adamcı rejimle mülteci krizi üzerinden gayri insani ilişkiler ve anlaşmalar kurmak. Birinci varılan nokta budur. Gayri insanidir mülteci pazarlıkları yapmak. Bunu tartışmaya gerek yok, sıklıkla dile getirildi. İkincisi ise dramın ve trajedinin skoru olarak ve istatistiği olarak görüyor ve yaklaşıyorlar. İnsan hakları dediğiniz şey Batı dünyası ve Avrupa Birliği devletleri için bir istatistiktir. Ölümün istatistiği, kanın, gözyaşının, dramın, trajedinin istatistiği olarak ilgileniliyor. Bir de dediğim gibi Türkiye'deki cihadist yayılmacılığı, Orta Doğu'daki yayılmacılığı görmezden gelerek mülteci kriziyle alakalı bir anlaşmaya gitmek ve bunların hiç yokmuş gibi özellikle Kürtlerle ilgili söz konusu gerek AHİM, gerek SİPİT'i, gerekse Avrupa Konseyi Bakanlar Komitesi ile alakalı bir süreçte Kürtlere lütuf sunuyormuş gibi bir role soyunuyor olması Kürtler açısından gurur inciticidir. Kürtler Avrupa'nın kapısında barış veya demokrasi dilencisi vesaire değildir. Kürtler Suriye'deki sorunun sebebi hiç değildir. Kürtler bunun sonucunda açığa çıkmış bir mazlumiyetin ve mağduriyetin sosyolojisini oluşturmaktadır orada. Eğer Kürtler tarihle birlikte o mağduriyetin üzerine bugün ele alınacaksa bir açıdan ele alınmalı. Dün belli ölçülerde değinildiği için ayrıntıya girmeyeceğim ama Kürt gençlerinin oradaki cihadizme ve barbarizme karşı mücadelesi sadece Kürtlerle ve Kürdistan'la sınırlı bir mücadele değildir. Bunu Sağır Sultan bilmektedir. Kürt gençleri orada insanlık düşmanı bir barbar ordusuna karşı özellikle bir kadın devrimini yaşarken bu sadece Kürtler için canları toprağa düşen bir jenerasyonu temsil etmemektedir. İnsanlık için mücadele ediliyor orada ve Avrupa'da eğer bu işe müdahil olacaksa Kürtler için müdahil olmamalı. Avrupa acılarla dolu, 300 yıllık acılarla dolu bir sürecin sonunda açığa çıkardığı kendi değer yargıları üzerinden müdahil olmalı. Eğer Avrupa Birliği müktesebatını rahatsız eden bir boyutu yoksa orada olan bitenlerin, sadece Kürtler için müdahil olmalarına falan gerek yok. Buradan bakmak alabildiğine olayı daraltır diye düşünüyorum. Bir diğer husus, Avrupa'nın gelinen nokta itibariyle biz sıklıkla dile getirdik. Orada savaşı finanse eden, özellikle silah ticaretini sağlayan güç olarak ortada durmaktadır. Üzülerek ifade etmeliyim. Bunun zaten sevinilecek bir tarafı olamaz. Avrupa Birliği Orta Doğu'daki savaşın sürecine finans kapitale ruhunu teslim ederek müdahil olmaktadır. Ve sadece kirli bir savaşta kullanılmıyor. Daha önce de bu örneği verdim. Tekrar vermek durumundayım. Eş Genel Başkanımız Selahattin Demirtaş 4 Kasım 2016 günü gözaltına alınıp götürülürken evine ilk ulaşan 2 milletvekilinden biriydim. Daha götürülmemişti. Bir Alman zırhlısına bindirilerek götürüldü. Bizim adına akrep dediğimiz bir Alman zırhlısıyla demokratik siyaset yapanlar Almanların ürettiği askeri araçlarla gözaltına alınıp tutuklanıp onun üzerinden burada AİHM'in verdiği kararları hiçbir şekilde dinlemeyen ve son birkaç günde cereyan eden bütün olayları hepimiz izliyoruz ki hani bu savaşta kullanılan boyutu mahsumdur diye söylemiyorum ama demokratik siyaseti zehirleyen süreçte Avrupa'nın ürettiği silahların kullanıldığına dikkat çekmek üzere bu veciz örneği veriyorum. Yani Avrupa bu konuda özellikle yönetenler olarak hiçbir şekilde masum bir noktada bulunmamaktadır. Evet, Kürtler böyle bir jeopolitiğin mekansal olarak ve siyasi olarak her tarafındadır. Belki Batı dünyası tarafından bugün Orta Doğu'da olan biten süreç içerisinde Kürtler bir oyun kurucu olarak işte gerek doğudaki bir birlik olarak Astana'da, Soçi'de oyun kurucu olarak kabul edilmiyor. Veya bir Batı dünyasının Suriye'deki sorunu çözmek üzere bir araya geldiği Cenevre'de oyun kurucu olarak kabul edilmiyor ama herhalde bütün dünya bir şeyi kabul ediyor. Kürtler süper güçler tarafından oyun kurucu olarak Orta Doğu'da görülmüyor olabilir ama unutulmamalıdır ki Kürtler olmaksızın kurulacak bir oyun da Orta Doğu'da kalmadı. Ve bunu da hiç kimsenin bahşettiği, lütfettiği bir güç olarak değil, dişiyle tırnağıyla 40 yıllık mücadelesiyle, kendi alın terleriyle, kendi emekleri ve açığa çıkarmış olduğu bedellerle yarattılar. Yine özellikle Kürtlerin Orta Doğu'da ve Orta Doğu jeopolitiğindeki bu belirleyici rolü ve tarihsel bağlamı bir gerçekliği kendi içerisinde barındırıyor. Kürtler sadece dünyanın devletsiz en büyük nüfusu değillerdir. Dünyanın en büyük devletsiz nüfusu olmanın yanında dünyanın devletsiz en büyük siyasi gücüdür de aynı zamanda. Gerek mekansal yayılım, gerekse bazı siyasi gelişmeleri belirleyen ve bunu çözüme doğru iten olması itibariyle. Dün değerli arkadaşımız Mahmut Şakar, Sayın Öcalan'ın bu konudaki rolünü, Orta Doğu'daki ön açıcılığını, Türkiye'deki demokratik siyasete kazandırdığı alanlar itibariyle HDP, HDP'den başlamak suretiyle izah etti. Şüphesiz Orta Doğu'da Kürtlere bütün bunca olan bitenden sonra dayatılan iki yolu asla kabul etmeyecek çünkü insani değildir. Kürtlere ya Bağızlarla birlikte ve onların kolonyalizmi altında bir yaşam dayatılıyor ya da cihadizm dayatılıyor. Bu ikisinin mümkün olmadığını daha bu patlak, Arap Baharı patlak vermeden çok önce Sayın Öcalan'ın ısrarla yazdığı, dile getirdiği, söylediği bilinen bir gerçeklik. Yine bugün Sayın Öcalan üzerindeki tecrit ve ona karşı başta Leyla Güven olmak üzere açığa çıkarılan ve bütün dünyaya yayılan, şu anda dönemsel olarak kendi açlık grevleriyle dışa vuran bu direnişin hiçbir şekilde görmezden gelinebilecek bir tarafı yoktur. Ve bu tecritin sadece Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Devleti ve hükümetiyle sınırlı olmayan bir sebebinin olduğunu da biliyoruz. Çünkü hesap bozulmaktadır. iki statükocu dayatılan güç arasında üçüncü bir yolu ve yeni yaşamı sadece önermemekte, yaşamsallaştırmaktadır. Kuzey Suriye Federasyonu'nda olan bitenler biraz Sayın Öcalan'ın paradigması ve felsefesi çevresinde bunun sadece söylem ötesinde uygulanabilir olduğu, bunun sadece Kürtlerin yaşadığı ülkelerle değil, Mısır'a, Filistin'e, hatta Yemen'e ve Arabistan'a model olabilecek bir yaşam modeli olduğunu iyi biliyoruz. Yine Türkiye'yi aşan bir tecrittir dememin temel sebebi de budur. Emperyal heveslerin, kolonyal heveslerin bütün felsefesini boşa çıkaran bir yaklaşım ve yaşam süreci var orada. Bugün bakın 6 Aralık 2018 günü Sayın Öcalan'la sadece 1 saat sağlanacak bir görüşmede bile Türkiye başta olmak üzere Orta Doğu'daki dengelerin değişeceğini, bu kör düğüme dönüşmüş olan savaş konseptinin boşa çıkacağını, oradan gelebilecek önermelerle birlikte yeni bir barışçıl yöntemin mümkün olacağını, halklara, Orta Doğu halklarına nefes aldırtabileceğini sadece 1 saatlik bir görüşmeyle bile sağlayabileceğinden herhalde taraflı tarafsız herkes emindir. Biz sadece emin olmak bir yana bu 1 saati aşan düzeyde kesinlikle onun kendi halkıyla ve siyasi yapısıyla bağını kurabileceği ve özgürlüğünün sağlanacağı bir şeyi isterken sadece Kürtler kendi statüsünü, öz yönetimini, özgürlüğünü arayan Kürtler değil, kalıcı onurlu barışı isteyen Orta Doğu halklarının tamamı için bir çözüm olacağından hareketle bunu talep ediyoruz. Bu sebeple bir kişisel özgürlük meselesi değildir. Ve gelinen nokta itibariyle Kürtlerin görmezden gelinemeyeceği ve bunun esas alınması gerektiği üzerinden 1-2 cümleyle konuşmamı tamamlayacağım. Şimdi süremi aştığımı fark ettim. Kürtler bütün bunlarla birlikte sadece zamanın ruhuna göre hareket eden bir halk ve siyasi harekete sahip değiller. Aynı zamanda kendi zamanlarını da yaratabilen bir halk oldular. 100 yıl önce Orta Doğu halkları başta Kürtler olmak üzere vicdanlarda mahkum olmuş olan cetvellerle sınırları çizilmiş 100 yıl öncenin Kürt halkı yok. Oradan oraya savrulan edilgen bir yapısı hiç yok. Zamanın ruhuna göre pozisyon değiştiren veya pozisyon alabilen bir halk değil, bir hareket olarak kendi zamanını ve bu zamanın ruhunu Orta Doğu'ya kalıcı ve onurlu barışı, özgürlüğüyle birlikte öneren bir halk. Öbür türlü Avrupa, bugün hani özellikle değinmek istedim, gerçekten kendi ruhunu sadece finans kapitale teslim etmiş ve Orta Doğu'ya sadece bu ruhu, bu düşüncesiyle müdahil olma yapısı gerçekten birçok açıdan huzursuzluk verici ve utanç verici bir durumdur. Özellikle şeyle alakalı olarak da, jeopolitikle alakalı olarak da belki de soru cevap bölümünde biraz daha konuyu açımlama şansımız olabilir diyor. Hepinizi tekrar saygıyla selamlıyorum.
Okay, vielen Dank, Herr Yildirim. Ich darf jetzt für den nächsten Beitrag an Herrn Bill Park übergeben vom Institut für Verteidigungsstudien aus dem King's College aus Großbritannien zu seinem Beitrag über die Rolle von Regionalmächten in dem Konflikt.
Okay. Thank you very much. The title of my talk is The Role of Regional Powers in the Conflict, which I've more or less unilaterally reinterpreted. So I'm going to talk mainly about the role of Turkey in Syria, because it seems to me there are a number of conflicts that overlap, but are nevertheless distinct. So that'll be my focus, but I'd like to make just a couple of opening remarks about the Syrian conflict and external powers in general. First of all, I think Syria very quickly became a playground for the rivalries and aspirations of regional and global powers. So a lot of what we've seen happen in Syria, a lot of the course that the conflict has taken, has arguably less to do with Syria and a lot more to do with the countries and powers around Syria. It's impossible to say whether, if somehow the Syrian conflict could have been insulated from external involvement, whether the regime would have been able to emerge victorious if the Gulf states, initially the West and Turkey, had not backed the rebels, or indeed whether the rebels might have emerged victorious if Russia and Iran had not sided with the regime. I think it's impossible to make that judgment. I certainly can't make it. But I think we can say that the conflict has been bloodier and has gone on longer and been more destructive to the lives and society of the Syrian people as a result of this external involvement. And as I say, much of it has not been about Syria at all. I think a second thing to say as a sort of preface for my remarks in just a moment is it's still very much a moving target. It seems to me that it's still not clear if and when the Syrian conflict will come to an end, and when it does, if it does, what kind of Syria will emerge. Indeed, I think it's an open question whether anything that is comparable to Syria of the past will emerge from the conflict we have. We might see some kind of basket case, some mess, some continuing zone of conflict and tension off into the distant future. And I think thirdly, and partly an explanation of that second point, is when you look at external involvement, what you see is on a whole range of issues that the Syrian conflict generates, almost any two countries are not aligned across the range of issues. So there's no clear alliance pattern surrounding Syria. I mean, just a couple of examples. It's tempting to say that Iran and Russia back the Syrian regime, which is true. But Russia is much more sensitive to the concerns of Israel than Iran is, for example. And Russia is probably also more sensitive to the concern of the Kurds in Syria than Iran is. So it's quite possible that those two countries will at certain stages fall out. So it seems to me in general, when you look at any two countries that are engaged in a Syrian conflict, even where they agree on one aspect of the conflict, they find themselves in a different position on other aspects of the conflict. And most obviously, from the point of view of what I want to talk about, this is true between the West and its NATO ally, Turkey. Initially, we all wanted to see the overthrow of Assad. But what happened after a couple of years is that Turkey became much more preoccupied with the emergence of Rojava and the PYD in Syria, whereas the West, and especially the United States, became more preoccupied with Islamic State. And to some extent, both have, not rhetorically, but in policy terms, largely dropped their opposition to Assad, at least in a sort of active way. And this, I think, will form the background of most of what I will say. So what we find now is that when looking at Turkey, as I say, at the beginning what we saw was a country that thought, a government that thought that Assad needed to go, that in many ways played the lead role in establishing the Syrian National Council, the Free Syrian Army, the opposition to Assad, and it also believed that the conflict would be over quite quickly and was relatively relaxed about the large number of refugees that crossed into Turkey because it didn't imagine the flow would continue and that they would be staying for very long. What we saw happen after a while, as I said, is when Rojava emerged, the Turkish preoccupation shifted from the overthrow of Assad to the establishment of Rojava and the activities of the YPG. And what that has done is really pit Turkey potentially against all the other external actors. Not actually on any one single issue to do with the Syrian conflict, but potentially on Syria. There's something that Turkey is in support of or opposed to that just about every other actor would disagree with. So I've already mentioned the US, the West, has aligned itself, the US especially, with the YPG forces. Why? Turkey didn't want to play a major role against the IS, did not join the coalition. The US didn't want to put its own boots on the ground. IS moved increasingly towards eastern Syria, east of the Euphrates, which was also a major base for the YPG presence. So the YPG and the IS came into conflict, and the YPG emerged as the obvious ally for the US in this fight against Islamic State. Turkey, on the other hand, in its hostility towards the establishment of Rojava, became, one could say, if one wished to be kind, relaxed about Islamic State. I would say that actually Turkey went further than that, indeed in some ways still goes further than that. It never really conducted a campaign, even to this day, against Islamic State with anything like the ferocity and determination of its campaign against the YPG in Syria. Also, Turkey championed jihadi groups that within a couple of years of the beginning of the conflict, the West had become increasingly suspicious of. The early example of this was when the US tried to persuade Turkey to proscribe Jabhat al-Nusra, which is the al-Qaeda affiliate, or that was the name it was given then. And it took about 9 months for Turkey to do that, but it never, in practice, really distanced itself that much from al-Qaeda forces. And I remember very much Davutoglu basically saying, these are okay, these are good guys, we can deal with them, to the United States. So they were very reluctant to turn on al-Qaeda. So as the West became suspicious of some of these jihadi groups, Turkey stayed very close to them. But of course it's not only, and this pits Turkey against Moscow, Tehran, Damascus, as well as the West, because Moscow, Tehran and Damascus also are nervous about these jihadi groups. Turkey's military presence in Syria came about in a very direct and overt form, in two forms really. First of all was the Operation Euphrates Shield, which moved into Jarablus and Azaz. And why did the Turks do that? To basically stop the cantons of Rojava uniting. And then earlier this year, as a second move, Turkey, with its jihadi allies, invaded Afrin. A problem that is going to land Turkey with downstream is that Turkey has an uninvited presence on Syrian territory. Any settlement or any peace negotiations that take place over Syria is going to involve Damascus saying, we want our territory back. And on a very regular basis, Syria condemns the Turkish presence on Syria. The Syrian government condemns the Turkish presence on Syrian territory. And this is going to create a dilemma for Russia at some point, and probably Iran too, because they are invited by the Damascus regime in a way that Turkey and, of course, the US is not. So what I really want to say, and I suppose my message, is that Syria has now become a major Turkish quagmire. In fact, I would say it's become 3 separate quagmires, and I'll just touch upon those and then draw to a close. First of all, you've got the quagmire of east of Euphrates, eastern Syria. Erdogan has threatened to wipe out the YPG there. Aside from the military problems of doing that in any case, the YPG is going to be difficult for Turkey to really confront, notwithstanding the fact there have been shelling and other engagements, because the US has different numbers, maybe 4,000 special forces there, a number of bases, have trained, have equipped YPG forces, have indeed enabled the YPG to establish a border force on the Syrian-Turkish border. The Americans themselves have set up, I think it's now 5 observation posts. And just over the last few days, James Jeffrey, the special envoy to Syria, has even been talking about a US no-fly zone over eastern Syria, east of the Euphrates. So a problem Turkey is going to have if it wants to wipe out the YPG, or even politically deal with the YPG east of the Euphrates, is how is it going to deal with the US alignment with the YPG? And increasingly, if you look at American rhetoric, this is moving as IS looks like it might be about to be defeated. I've got an open mind about that. The US is also moving towards the Iranian presence in Syria, so that will keep the Americans in Syria longer. So that's one problem Turkey has. A second problem is Idlib. Back in the summer, the Turks and the Russians, basically it was the Turks and the Russians, arrived at a so-called deconfliction agreement over Idlib, in which and Turkey did this to forestall a regime and Russian attack on Idlib. And what Turkey undertook was to take away heavy weapons from the rebel groups in Idlib, and mostly that is where the rebel groups now are, having been pushed from places like Aleppo and the Damascus suburbs. They're supposed to take away the heavy weapons and gradually take over control of Idlib as a prelude to peace negotiations involving the regime. The problem is Turkey does not have the capacity, and I think at least at the moment not the will either, to really control Idlib. And in any case, some groups are not playing this game. So you have Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which has up to 15,000 troops, forces, fighters in Idlib, and is said to control maybe 2/3, 60% or 2/3 of the territory, is not engaging in this process of deconfliction, indeed is engaging in continuing engagements with the regime forces on the border of Idlib with Aleppo and other government-controlled areas around Idlib. And it's not clear that Turkey can control this. Damascus is already saying quite openly that they don't trust the Turks and they don't think they're capable of doing the job. The Russians are being a bit more careful about it. Why? Because they don't much want to have the fight in Idlib themselves. They rather like the prospect of weaning Turkey away from the West and creating this problem. So Russia isn't in a hurry. But again, at some point, Russia will be confronted with the problem of what does it do about Idlib if the Turks do not control the rebel forces there. And right now they seem neither to have the capacity or the will to do that. So that, I think, is a second quagmire that Turkey has. And then finally is Afrin. Afrin is probably, I mean, why did Turkey attack Afrin anyway? It's quite interesting. I think they wanted clearly to get at the YPG of Rojava in any way they could. And Afrin looked the easiest target, slightly isolated, relatively low YPG presence. And also I think they did it to some degree as a reaction to the Americans agreeing to form a YPG border force in eastern Syria. So I think it was a sort of impulsive reaction as much against the Americans as anything else. However explained, it isn't clear what the Turks now do with Afrin. I mean, they are Turkifying it. They are ethnically cleansing it. It's become quite lawless. There's a lot of looting going on. Actually, it spawned another 300,000 refugees, some of whom have gone to Turkey. So it's actually made Turkey's refugee problem worse. What is not clear is that Afrin is in any way settled, and it's not clear where it's going. The more you look at the Turkification of Afrin, the Turkish language, the settlement of Turkmen, the Turkish flag, the introduction of Turkish services like postal services, the more it looks like an annexation. And indeed, sometimes I look and think that is what Turkey is planning. That's going to be a major, major problem in the future if and when we get on to talks about the future of Syria, because Damascus, and therefore I think Russia, in some way at some stage, and therefore Iran is not going to accept this. So it seems to me Turkey has these three different quagmires, and I don't see easily how Turkey handles them or gets out of any of them. To keep within the time limit, how do we explain Turkish behaviour? I mean, one part of it clearly is related to the peace process in Turkey itself. The more I look at this, the more I think there's a kind of chicken and egg. I think Kobani and the rise of the YPG unsettled the peace process in Turkey, but I also think the problems of the peace process unsettled Turkey about Syria. So I think these two things became quite locked together. But that doesn't amount to a strategy or a policy. And the more I look at Turkish behaviour on this issue, and indeed on other issues, the more it looks like it's an expression of not clear thinking, but of Erdogan's personality. It's impulsive, it's emotional, it's assertive, But it's not clear to me that Turkey ever really thought much about the end state. So for me, the reason why the word quagmire seems to apply so well to the Turkish situation is they have got themselves, they're wading through treacle, they're in this mess, or three different messes, and at no stage have they really thought about how they get beyond it. If we speculate to the future, which I'm reluctant to do, because I think there's so much that's still moving, one could say, one could imagine that at some stage Damascus and Ankara will come together. Why? Because neither will want Rojava. So what have started off as arch enemies in the Syrian conflict might actually find themselves quite aligned. But again, that's going to create a big problem for Russia, let alone the problem that it creates for the United States. But even so, even if Damascus is prepared to tolerate a Turkish presence on Syrian territory for a while in a joint struggle to defeat Rojava, even so, Damascus is eventually going to want an end state which involves the withdrawal of Turkish troops. So we can see the possibility of a tactical or tacit, covert understanding between Damascus and Ankara, but it's much harder to see a longer-term agreement on what the future of Syria should look like. So what I'm expecting, and mainly I look at the Syrian crisis, if you like, through a Turkish lens, I don't mean a pro-Turkish lens, but through what Ankara is doing, it looks to me that unless Turkey either ups the game in terms of military presence or loses a lot of face, is going to be stuck in Syria for a long time. And somewhere along the way, and probably more so the more we get towards peace negotiations over Syria, we're going to find Turkey fighting on all fronts as all of its countries, all of the other external engagers, including its present friends Moscow and Tehran, will start to shift away from the Turkish position because of its unwanted and unwelcome presence on Syrian territory. Thank you.
Ja, vielen Dank für diesen Beitrag. Wir machen jetzt weiter mit Michael Gunter von EUTCC Sekretariat aus den USA für seinen Beitrag über die NATO und den Mittleren Osten, Krise versus Konsolidierung.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Well, thank you for coming this morning. Thank you for the weather cooperating. It's not raining yet. Usually it does rain here. But I'm pleased to be here all the way from where? Tennessee. That's where I come from, United States. I'm going to talk about NATO and the Middle East, crisis versus consolidation. The Syrian war that began in March 2011 has now led to a crisis in U.S.-Turkish relations, among many other things. A crisis in U.S.-Turkish relations threatening to actually pit U.S. troops against those of its supposed NATO ally, Turkey. This was because the U.S. had armed and continued to support the Syrian Kurds against ISIS, Kurdish forces which Turkey viewed as an existential terrorist threat to Turkish territorial integrity. With the victory of these U.S.-supported Kurdish forces over ISIS by the end of 2017, the U.S. drew further Turkish ire by announcing it would train and support some 30,000 Syrian Kurdish troops as border guards. As you know, on January 20th of this year, Turkish troops with their Syrian opposition allies entered Afrin, the isolated third Syrian Kurdish canton on Turkey's border in northwestern Syria. No better illustration of the Trump administration's new problems could be given than the initial spectacle of Turkey, a U.S. NATO ally, needing permission from Russia, NATO's main adversary, before acting. This was because Russia controlled the skies over the Kurdish enclave and, in effect, had been partially protecting it as part of its goal of preserving Syrian unity under its president Bashar al-Assad. However, now Russia decided not to oppose the Turkish incursion in support for Turkish backing for Russia's larger overall aims in Syria, such as weakening U.S. influence in Syria, pushing the Kurds to negotiate with Damascus, and strengthening Russian-Turkish cooperation to the detriment of NATO. Of course, Turkish animus toward the Syrian Kurds was nothing new, as earlier on August 26, 2016, Turkish troops had entered Syria to the east of Afrin to prevent the Syrian Kurds from crossing the Euphrates River and driving to the west of that waterway to unite with Afrin. At that time, Operation Euphrates Shield managed to prevent these Kurdish ambitions. However, despite U.S. promises, the Syrian Kurds did not retreat back to the east of the Euphrates River. The Syrian Kurds continued to hold the city of Manbij on the west side of the Euphrates with U.S. troops as advisors, whom the U.S. said would stand their ground. U.S. troops would stand their ground against any Turkish offensive. Therefore, this time, U.S. troops could find themselves under direct attack from their NATO ally if Erdogan actually carried out his promise to, quote, strangle before it is born the U.S.-backed Syrian Kurdish border security force. The Turkish president even threatened that we will, quote, rid Manbij of terrorists, as was promised to us before. Our battles will continue until no terrorist is left right up to our border with Iraq. Exuding outrage in reference to the U.S. support for the Syrian Kurds, the Turkish president asked rhetorically, how can a strategic partner do such a thing to its strategic partner? Erdogan even threatened to give the U.S. troops an Ottoman slap, employing a Turkish idiom for a deadly or incapacitating blow. Now, of course, Erdogan did not want actually to attack U.S. forces. His real aim was probably to end U.S. support for the Syrian Kurds, collect the weapons the group had received from the U.S., and force the Kurds to withdraw east of the Euphrates River. Likely, even more importantly, his bellicose attitude was intended for domestic consumption, to boost his support in Turkey before upcoming elections he suddenly scheduled for June 24th of this year, and which, of course, he indeed easily won. In addition, the U.S.-Turkish falling out exasperated other problems involving Turkey and NATO, the most flagrant of which was Turkey's agreement to purchase 2 batteries of advanced Russian air defense S-400 surface-to-air missiles. This Russian system cannot be integrated into the NATO air defense systems and will be operated by Russians. Thus, Russia might gain enormous intelligence concerning NATO defenses. Even more troubling, since Turkey is scheduled to take delivery of 116 stealth F-35 fighter jets that will be the cornerstone of NATO's combat air resources for the next 30 years, Turkey will be in an excellent position to sharpen the S-400 Russian air defense system against the F-35s from the United States. Intelligence that Russia will then be in a position to take advantage of to defeat the whole purpose of NATO's new generation of F-35 fighter jets. However, in June 2018, the U.S. and Turkey finally reached a temporary understanding for the Syrian Kurdish forces to pull out of Manbij and be replaced by a joint U.S.-Turkish force. This agreement temporarily alleviated the possibility of a military clash between the two NATO allies. Of course, this would only be a beginning settlement, as Turkey declared that the Manbij model would also be applied to Syria's Raqqa, Kobani, and other important areas controlled by the Syrian Kurds. A proposed roadmap certain to be opposed and rejected by the Syrian Kurds. Thus, the onus would again fall upon the United States to decide whether to support its de facto Syrian Kurdish ally or support its de jure Turkish NATO ally. In addition, and winding up here, in addition, other important problems continue to tax the badly frayed alliance between the U.S. and Turkey, including, one, Turkey's insistence that the U.S. extradite Fethullah Gulen, an Islamic scholar, religious figure heading an international movement and exiled in the United States, whom, as you know, Turkey blamed for the bloody, failed coup against Erdogan on July 15th, 2016. That's one major problem between Turkey and the United States. In effect, the United States has been giving sanctuary to Gulen. And recently there is some talk that Trump is ready to throw Gulen to Erdogan as another sop to help solve the problem between the U.S. and Turkey. Other problems between U.S. and Turkey: the U.S. movement of its embassy in Israel to Jerusalem on May 14th of this year. A third problem, the sentencing in New York, also in May 2018, of a former Turkish state Halkbank bank executive to 32 months in prison for taking part in an Iran sanctions busting scheme. A fourth problem, of course, Erdogan's increasingly authoritarian rule. 5, Turkey's incarceration of Andrew Brunson, an American Protestant pastor whom Turkey accused of terrorism for supposedly supporting the attempted Gulen coup. And 6th, among others, the resulting U.S. economic sanctions against Turkey, which Turkey blamed for the precipitous fall of its currency, among others. However, in closing, the precipitous decline in U.S.-Turkish relations was at least temporarily stemmed on October 2nd, 2018, by Saudi Arabia's incredible murder at its consulate in Istanbul of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who had been writing for the Washington Post. This gruesome affair, grinding him up in a meat grinder and shipping him out the back door, or what was left of him, led Turkey and the U.S. to cooperate in investigating the details. And then, of course, Turkey's sudden release of Pastor Brunson on October 12th of this year also helped to ease the U.S.-Turkish crisis and steady the continuing fall of the lira as the U.S. pulled back some of its economic sanctions on Turkey. Nevertheless, in closing, the basic confrontation over the Syrian Kurds between Turkey and the United States remained. Thank you very much.
Okay. Ja, vielen Dank an Michael Gunter für seine Ausführungen, für die vielen verschiedenen Aspekte des Konfliktes in der Region. Und ich darf jetzt endlich übergeben an Kinoshita Akinobu von der Japanisch-Kurdischen Freundschaftsgruppe für seinen Beitrag. Ich glaube, wir haben jetzt auch das Problem mit den Übersetzungen gelöst und freuen uns nun auf seinen Beitrag.
I would firstly like to thank the organizers of this conference for giving me the opportunity to talk here. And secondly, I want to point out that my English is not so good. Please bear this in mind while listening, and please follow the presentation when my English becomes difficult to understand. So, I thank you in advance for your understanding. The Japanese take a friendly attitude toward all peoples and ethnicities, do not discriminate against any religion or social group. There is no discrimination on the basis of color or descent. On February 13, 1990, the Japanese government proposed racial equality for the first time in history at Paris Peace Conference. Japan had expected that the League of Nations would endorse the bill, but it was only 50 years later, on 21 December 1965, that the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination was adopted and opened for signature by the United Nations General Assembly. It could be said that Japan played a pioneering role in this connection. For detailed information, please refer to. Japan proposed to eliminate ethnic discrimination so that ethnic and religious conflict would not occur. It is very sad to see that conflict is still occurring now. Denial and negation causes conflict, and coalition affirmation lead to dialogue. No religion can be denied or compelled. Likewise, ethnicity, culture, tradition must not be denied. It's not the best solution to respect one another mutually. Japanese Bushido is nothing else than paying due respect to one's counterpart. Atatürk, the first president of the Republic of Turkey, abolished the Islamic system, following the westernization strategy of the Meiji Restoration in Japan. The Turkish government aimed to be a modern state by creating a single ethnic nation with wealth and military strength. The Turkish army has had great influence on politics. As a founder, Atatürk was a military person. I believe that the assimilation policy caused the Kurdish question. The Erdogan regime is not based on the secularism of President Atatürk, but based on Islamism, and I think that he takes the state back to Ottoman imperialism. Friendly relationship between Japanese and the Turkish government date back to the days of Ottoman Empire. The sinking of the Ottoman frigate Ertuğrul and relief operation by the Japanese deepened this relationship. This is also written in Turkish school textbooks. Kurdish ethnic problem in Turkey were rarely known about in Japan. Now, the Kurdish people who fight IS have became widely known, and Japanese media follow the Kurdish refugee problem closely. I think that The Kurdish and Turkish nation should be a good friend. It is a fact that most Kurds in Japan are secularists and democrats. Turkey's overseas voting was held at the Turkish embassy on 25 October 2015. Turks and Kurds fought each other during voting. Before the voting date, there was some posts saying that Turkish officials planned to attack Kurds. The Kurdish community went together to vote, which led to a high turnout. After this incident, the Japanese police began to guard with a team of 500 persons. I participated every time and watched voting. In order to prevent an incident and to ensure safe voting, we cooperate with the police. Turkish government brought ethnic conflict to Japan. After the incident, Kurdish people stood in line and picked up garbage in order to avoid inconvenience to the neighborhood. Kurdish people understand Japanese style. It started with regulation that Kurds and Turks should vote at different times. While the Kurds voted, the Turkish waited in the neighbor mosque. This mosque was built by Mitsu Toyama, who stood up for Asian independence movement. He urged Japanese companies and volunteers to support Muslim minorities in Japan. This is even Japan a little known fact. Europe and the United States accepted immigrants as labor forces. Japan encouraged its own people to immigrate to other countries during the last century. There is no law to accept immigrants today in Japan. They say there is peace between war and war. Japan will not reach them. Many citizens have been sacrificed in the Russo-Japanese war and the economy was badly damaged. Therefore, being a small island country, Japan encouraged its citizens to emigrate to abroad. Geoeconomics refer to geological economics if geopolitics is considered nationalism. I take geoeconomics as globalism. Topographical economic warfare is a key currency. By virtue of this key currency, economic sanctions become possible. Now, nationalism is gaining power all over the world. When economics slacken and growth accompanied by employment problems, nationalism rises. If the economy grows, labor forces from abroad are demanded. In other words, geopolitics and geoeconomics are interrelated. Kurdistan is said to be the largest ethnic group in the world. Without their own state, Kurdistan was divided into Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Armenia, and Iran by the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Geopolitically, Kurdistan was a buffer zone between the Ottoman and Persian empires. Geoeconomically, it is isolated, not unlike an island country. Before the age of discovery, land trade was enough for survival. Now, maritime transport is geoeconomically the most important factor for trade. There is no port in Kurdistan. Trade must go through the territory of one of the neighboring lands, every single one of which is aggressively hostile toward Kurds. Kurdistan is geopolitically and geoeconomically vulnerable. There is no port, despite its rich and plentiful natural resources. The economic income of Kurdistan regional government of Iraq depends on crude oil export. They are exported either from the coastal Shiite region or through Turkey, Syria, Jordan, and Iran. There is no way other than this. Turkey is at the entrance of Asia and Europe, so she has bought from the Iraq Kurdish autonomous government. Turkey is economically the best way to export oil. That's right. KLG and Turkey have a good relationship. The Kurdish people of North Syria are in conflict with Turkey and also do not like KLG of Iraq. This is explainable through geoeconomics and geopolitics. The Turkish government can solve this if it would take an appeasement policy toward Kurdish people in the country. The Kurdish people are not united. There are geopolitical and economical conflicts. Turkey has accepted refugees from conflict zones. However, if labor capital decline, incomes also decline. The move sluggish the economy becomes the higher nationally rises due to economic sanctions. The Kurdish economic downturn may also be utilized in connection with the confrontation with Kurdish people. Virtual currency can be a way to unite Kurdish people economically. It is possible that Kurdish will be united if their interests meet. I think that the issue of Kurdistan coin is one way of achieving this. In April 2017, in order to inform refugee support and the current status of each other about the Levant Ministry and Agency of Japan and mass media, and to cooperate with the Kurdish nation in the future, the Japan-Kurdistan Friendship Association invited Kurdish statements from EU, Turkey, Syria, and Iraq and held a conference. However, it did not meet with expected response either in Japan or abroad. I hope that such meetings can be organized and carried out more often. And of World Committee, the Turkish invasion of Syria is not seen as a measure with the objective of setting a buffer zone for refugees. On the contrary, it is sought to be what it really is, namely a war of conquest and violation of international law and most fundamental ethnic standards. In this connection, I have to add that I am of the opinion that neither Turkey's ongoing war of aggression and subjugation, nor its general destructive stance toward and against Kurds of North Syria would be possible without that tacit approval and support from European countries. The global community had to helplessly what the almost absolute indifference that European states, but also Japanese government and society, show to what happened and is happening in North Syria. I think that European states must admit their responsibility for the immense suffering of the Kurdish people in the region and act accordingly. Otherwise, that is, if Europe continue to tacitly applaud this destructive attitude and mode of population, one would legitimately ask the following question: would European country turn a blind eye if Turkey carried its war of destruction into Europe for the same simple reason that Kurds live there? Recently, a Japanese journalist was released. He was detained as he entered Syria from the Turkish border. There is nothing surprising about the fact that Japanese people think that Turkey is a dangerous country when IS terrorists are allowed to move freely in and out. As a good friend from Japan, I call on the Turkish government to put an end to the conflict with the Kurdish people and resume immediately the peace process. To reconcile with Kurdish people of North Syria and the Syrian government. People flee the country because of problems they cannot solve. No one would abandon their country. There are various problems, rich and poor disparities, ethnic discrimination and religious discrimination. The right leader gives the people a proper education. People who have received proper education choose the right leaders. In order to coexist with the Kurdish people in Japan, we are carrying out activities for mutual understanding, such as Japanese classrooms, picking up garbage, safety patrols, Japanese and Kurdish cuisine, national custom, disaster volunteer, and so on. With the aim of enabling and fostering mutual understanding among the young people of the world, we established the World Kurdish Student Association Japan. As the proverb said, in Roma, do as the Romans do. Learning the culture, history, and tradition of the other people enable people to develop mutual relation to one another and to begin to respect each other. Thank you very much.
Ja, vielen großen Dank an Herrn Akinobu. Ich glaube, wir sind alle sehr, sehr beeindruckt von seinem Vortrag, von seinem Beitrag, gerade auch die Bilder, die wir in der PowerPoint-Präsentation mitsehen und verfolgen konnten, als auch seine Ausführungen haben uns deutlich gemacht, wie groß auch seine Unterstützung und seine Solidarität mit den Kurdinnen und Kurden ist. Und es ist natürlich gerade in so einer Phase, in der die Kurdinnen und Kurden sowohl in der Türkei als auch in Syrien, in der gesamten Region unter vielen verschiedenen Konfliktlagen leben und versuchen, ihre Interessen zu organisieren, ist, glaube ich, die Solidarität, die aus verschiedenen Ecken der Welt kommt und gerade jetzt auch aus Japan ein sehr, sehr großer Beitrag und eine wirklich sehr, sehr wertvolle Unterstützung, für die ich mich oder für die wir uns auch ganz herzlich bedanken. Wir machen jetzt weiter und eigentlich hätten wir ja an dieser Stelle Herrn Zubeyir Aydar vom KNK als Redner für seinen Beitrag in diesem letzten in dem letzten Part des dritten Panels für den heutigen Tag. Wir bedauern erneut, dass er jetzt nicht hier sein kann und verurteilen natürlich die Vorgehensweise des Europäischen Parlaments und die Argumentation aus Sicherheitsgründen, seine Teilnahme heute hier nicht zu erlauben, ist für uns einfach untragbar und wir bitten um Klärung dieser Situation. Ich darf jetzt übergeben an Frau Dersim Dadevren, auch vom EUTCC-Sekretariat, für ihren Beitrag. Vielen Dank.
Ja, vielen Dank, Gökay. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, auch ich möchte Sie im Namen des EUTCC-Vorstandes hier bei unserer 15. Konferenz ganz herzlich begrüßen. Ich sitze heute hier anstelle von Zubeyir Aydar. Ihm wurde der Zugang zu dieser Konferenz verwehrt. Herr Aydar war von Beginn an Bestandteil des Konferenzprogrammes. Wir haben ihn auch ordnungsgemäß akkreditiert und bis gestern Morgen, als wir vor den Türen des Europaparlaments standen, wurde uns als Organisatoren solche Sicherheitsbedenken nicht mitgeteilt. Wir verurteilen die Verwehrung des Zugangs zum Europaparlament für Herrn Aydar aufs Schärfste und fordern hier das Parlament auf, dringend Klärung herbeizuführen. Wir wissen aber auch, dass Sicherheitsgründe ein gern genommener Vorwand sind. Was wir auch wissen ist, dass der türkische Staat mit allen Mitteln versucht, solche Konferenzen zu verhindern. Nicht nur solche Konferenzen, aber gerade, weil wir hier im Europaparlament sitzen, natürlich Konferenzen, in denen wir die Politik der Türkei, die expansive und repressive Politik dechiffrieren. Das Europaparlament, das stets von westlichen Werten spricht, das die Demokratie als ihr zentrales Monument preist, hat mit dieser Entscheidung hier große Fragezeichen hinterlassen. Und ich glaube, dass es im Sinne dieser Werte ist, wenn das Europaparlament diese Entscheidung überdenkt und rückgängig macht. Das wird für die heutige Konferenz nicht möglich sein, aber für zukünftige Konferenzen. In der Vergangenheit übrigens, zuletzt vor 2 Jahren, saß Herr Aydar auf diesem Podium und hat einen wesentlichen, wichtigen Beitrag für eine politische Lösung der Konflikte im Nahen Osten mit seinem Redebeitrag geleistet. Und was wir auch nicht vergessen dürfen ist, wir haben noch vor wenigen Wochen eine Entscheidung vom Europäischen Gerichtshof gehabt in Bezug auf die EU-Terrorliste. Der Gerichtshof hat entschieden, dass die Listung der PKK nicht rechtmäßig war. Wir haben ein belgisches Gerichtsurteil, das die PKK als einen Teil, als eine Seite des Konfliktes beschreibt und in diesem Zusammenhang dann jemanden aus Sicherheitsgründen, einen Menschen, der einen wichtigen Beitrag für eine politische Lösung, und das ist ja auch im Sinne der europäischen Werte und der Werte des EU-Parlaments hier vorgetragen hätte, den Zugang zu verwehren, ist sicherlich nicht förderlich für Demokratie im Nahen Osten und in der Türkei. Und die Türkei und der Nahe Osten brauchen Frieden und Demokratie mehr denn je. Deswegen freue ich mich heute im Namen des EUTCC-Vorstandes nun den Beitrag von Herrn Zubeyir Aydar vortragen zu können. Dear friends and participants, since Turkey's entry into the negotiation process for accession to the European Union, repetition of the regular international conference series under the title The EU, Turkey and the Kurds, and following Turkey-European Union relations in a civil point of view, is an important initiative which should be appreciated. It is clear that the main theme of the 15th conference is the emergence of the Kurds in the Middle East, whose situations have changed as a stabilizing factor in overcoming the problems of the Middle East. This will contribute to the discussions of the solution to the emerging problems in the Middle East. I would like to express many thanks to the EUTCC, the European Parliament Left Group, the European Parliament Socialist Democratic Group, the European Parliament Green Group, and everyone who contributed, and wish them success. Dear participants, I will also, in accordance with the conference main theme and title of the panel, try to express my views on the role of the Kurds, Turkey's European Union relations, war, stability, change and democracy in Turkey and the Middle East. In my speech, I will focus more on the answers to the questions as how do the Kurdish side see the current situation, what position they adopt, what is happening, what do they suggest. When we look back 100 years ago, the First World War ended just about now. After the war, the Middle East region was given a new shape with the Sykes-Picot, Sèvres and Lausanne treaties. Countries, peoples, tribes, families were divided by unfair and randomly drawn boundaries, and problems were created for 100 years. Even 100 years later, a world war is still being experienced in the region. US and European countries, Russia, Turkey, Iran, the Arab countries, Israel, Kurds and many states and forces that not named are in this war. It is not yet known how long this war will still last and what shape the region will take after the war. The Middle East solution to the winners of the First World War, England and France, was a nation-state model where the realities of the region were not taken into account. The borders were drawn in favour of the victors, and with divide and rule policy, the affiliated governments were in power. This model began to create problems from the beginning. It still continues to create problems. In addition to many problems, this model has left the Israel-Palestine and Kurdish problem unsolved. For 100 years, a suitable solution for both problems had not been found. Both problems concern the entire region and also seriously affect the international arena. The status quo established by the Western states after the First World War was always problematic from beginning to end. The established status did not respond to the demands of the people of the region, and on the contrary, it created problems around the world. In Iran, it also created an unitarian and totalitarian Islamic regime that confronts the world system and deepens the problems around. In Iraq, it prepared the ground for Baath regime and a dictator such as Saddam. Indeed, in Syria, it created the Assad and Baath regime, which led to the emergence of the present chaos. In Turkey, which was put forward as an example or model country for many years, it created Erdogan's unitarian and repressive regime. These are the leading countries of the region. The problem producing capacities of other countries in the region are not less than those mentioned. This model not only created problematic regimes in the region, but also created numerous problematic organizations. Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Al-Nusra, ISIS and many more Salafi organizations are the products of these processes. If Al-Qaeda was able to form a major international terrorist network, if ISIS could take over most of the Iraqi and Syrian territory in a short period of time, if such Salafist organizations are still able to go javelin in the regional countries, if these organizations are still able to carry out attacks in important centers of the world, then this is the result the system established in the region after the First World War, which left the problems unsolved. Dear participants, Western powers always continued their interventions on the region. First, it was England, and after the Second World War, the United States took the leading role. The US interventions in the 1990s and beyond were very comprehensive. In Iraq and Afghanistan, governments were changed by military interventions. They announced a project called the Great Middle East Project. On the basis of this project, the region as a whole was going to both change and democratic gains would take place. The United States is still intervening in all aspects of the region. However, these interventions are far from creating solutions. These interventions cannot create solutions. They are not enough to restore the old system, and they also create new problems. Now, including the US, no one is talking about the Great Middle East project. Everyone is trying to save the day. The huge problems of the region, especially the Kurdish issue, are pending in the Middle East. The Kurds suffered the most from the status quo that was established after the First World War. Kurdistan was divided into 4 against the will of the Kurdish people. In the last 100 years, the geography of Kurdistan has always been commemorated by riots, massacres, war and military operations. Turkey, Iran, Iraq and Syria have been seeing the Kurds as a continuing problem. The rebels that must be silenced, disrupting public order and a destabilizing force in the region. They often acted together to suppress the Kurds. Sometimes they used the Kurdish card against each other. In terms of foreign powers intervening in the region, the Kurdish fear of the countries in the region was a very useful factor. In fact, they used this card very well. As a matter of fact, they were the ones primarily left this problem unsolved. To scare these countries, to make them accept their policies, to force them to make concessions. As a result of this policy, the Kurds had to be supported from time to time, but they shouldn't have succeeded. In other words, they should not be defeated and disappeared, nor should they achieve complete success. In other words, the policy of run with the hare and hunt with the hounds was applied. These policies were successfully implemented until the 2000s. Dear participants, is this policy still not implemented? It is still being implemented, but Kurds are no longer the old Kurds. In addition, the problems in the region have grown so much that they are forcing the entire world. In the past, problems were localized in the region, and they were not directly affecting Europe and America. Now, millions of refugees appear at the gates of Western countries due to the crisis. Terror slots in the region are able to export terror to the whole world. As the crisis deepens more, the more problems are growing. As the problems grow, the need for solution is growing so urgently. Let's look at who is proposing what or who is doing what to solve these grave problems. Turkey is an important power in the region and is a member of NATO. In its domestic politics, it is authoritarian and repressive, and in its foreign policy, it is pursuing an expansionist policy line in the line of Muslim Brotherhood, which bases its policy on Sunni Islam. The consequences of this line in the region is clear, especially in Syria, Egypt, Libya and Tunisia, and it is far from creating solutions. Iran does not tolerate even the slightest opposition in its domestic politics, but it pursues hegemony in its foreign policy based on the Shiite sect. When we look at the practice in Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Iraq and Yemen in short, it becomes clear what these policies cause. The Sunni bloc, led by Saudi Arabia, has no other approach than maintaining the current status quo. In addition, the approach of Islamic groups is no more than creating problems. The savage practices of the Salafist groups like Al-Qaeda, Taliban, ISIS, Al-Nusra, etc., against the people of the region and the export of terror to the outside world are apparent. Once they made the propaganda of AKP in Turkey and Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt as moderate Islam. The Egyptian practice of the Ikhwan is obvious. The AKP also produced a dictator, such as Recep Tayyip Erdogan at the end. The support and relationship of the Erdogan regime to ISIS, Al-Nusra and similar Salafist organizations should also be addressed. The secular and democratic movements of the region are both weak and unable to possess a clear change program. If the matter is left to these aforementioned forces, the region will continue to struggle in its own problems. Dear participants, I mentioned above that the Kurds were not the old Kurds. The dynamism that was developed in Kurdistan both became stronger and revealed the alternative in the 2000s. With its new paradigm, the Kurdistan Freedom Movement is a candidate to play a key role in resolving the problems of the region. According to this, women in the society will have a say and a decision. Different ethnic groups will dwell in their originality, and they will live together on the basis of equal rights, with the perspective of a democratic nation. In this way, while the society will ensure its interior peace within itself, it will also live in peace with nature, while also protecting the ecology. Here, the Kurdish movement's Rojava and northern Syrian practice is in front of the eye, and it is instructive. In northern Syria, ethnicity-wise, Kurds, Arabs, Assyrians, Armenians, Chechens and Turkmens, and as religious beliefs, Muslims, Christians, Yazidis and Alevis, are the components of the regional administration. They live together in peace, despite all the provocations of external forces. Women, as the dominant players in the management of all areas of life, have a say and a decision-making role. Resistance and sacrifice of women, especially in the field of defense against all the attacks, has been legendary and sought after. Despite the war environment and economic embargoes, the administration established in northern Syria continues its path steadily on the basis of both economic and democratic structures. It is the best tangible practice that can be taken and exemplified in the establishment of the new Syria. Together with the Kobani War, international forces saw the Kurds as a military alternative to ISIS and Salafi groups and approached them. Although this is a correct approach, it is an insufficient one. Against the brutal attacks of ISIS and similar forces, the Kurdish movement is not only a military alternative. At the same time, it is the most appropriate alternative with its ideological, political, social and administrative approaches. Now, in the construction of the new Syria and in the political process, this is the most important aspect to be seen. Particularly, the US and European powers should stand out by recognizing this aspect. The Kurds are not just an alternative that should be considered in Syria. with the solution models that they put forward, with their organized situation, with their population, demographic and economic potential in both Turkey, Iran, Iraq and Syria, the Kurds are the pioneer and engine power of democratic change. With these positions, the Kurds can play a pioneering role in solving the heavy problems of the region, not the ones that are creating problems. I am not saying that when the Kurdish problem is solved, all problems will be solved, but when this problem is solved on a democratic basis in the mentioned countries, the region will take great breath and it will contribute to the solution of other problems. This will be an important step in achieving stability in the region. With these positions, the Kurds have emerged as an important actor in ensuring democracy and stability in the region. Dear participants, I pointed out earlier the Western powers' approach to the region in general has always been problematic and brought with them new problems. One of the most problematic areas was the approach to the Kurds. Currently, this problematic approach continues in both the US and Europe. First, all the Kurds were being rejected. They were not being considered very reasonable. After the problems with Saddam in Iraq, the southern Kurds became good Kurds. With the ISIS war, the Kurds of Rojava also were taken to the status of good Kurds. The intervention against Iran is being discussed, and Eastern Kurds may soon be good Kurds too. But the northern Kurds have always been bad Kurds. For 30 years, this double standard and hypocritical good Kurd, bad Kurd approach continues. That is why some Kurds have been put in terror lists, narcotic lists and death lists, while some are being met in palaces. However, there is no significant difference between them. The difference between them is the state they are fighting against. Meanwhile, the decision of the European Court of Justice on November 15 showed how created terror list was unfair and unlawful. With this decision, the part of the list related to the PKK in 2014 till 17 was cancelled with all its results. Since the case was opened in 2014 and reached the decision stage in 2018, the 2018 list could not be added to the case. However, the reasons are the same. 2018 year list for a technical reason could not be added. The list thus completely collapsed. Hereby, my call to the EU executives is to review the list as soon as possible and remove the PKK from the mentioned list. On the other hand, the US administration on November 6 awarded a prize for the arrest or murder of 3 prominent names of the Kurdish liberation movement, Mr. Cemil Bayık, Mr. Murat Karayılan, and Mr. Duran Kalkan. We consider this decision as unlawful, immoral, hypocritical, and hostile. These friends have not harmed the American state nor any Americans. These self-sacrificing and precious people during their lifetime have fought for justice in the liberation of the Kurdish people against the oppressors, the torturers and the enemies of humanity. We expect the US government to take back this decision as soon as possible. Dear participants, both the terrorism list and such unfair practices are decisions that are taken to balance and please Turkey. With such decisions, you cannot balance the Kurds and the Turks. You cannot please Turkey enough and you push the Kurds. Turkey's demands are endless. Erdogan will ask more to eliminate all the Kurdish people's entire gains and achievements. This means war and instability for the whole region. Western powers, especially the US and the EU, should abandon the policy of run with the hare and hunt with the hounds if they want to do the right job. The most accurate and beneficial work that these forces should do is to bring the Kurds together with the Turks around the peace and negotiation table. Such a situation will satisfy the majority and will enjoy the good of everyone. A just, fair and appropriate status for Kurds in the Middle East will make a great contribution to the peace and stability of the region, as it is in everyone's interest. I would like to state that as Kurdistan Freedom Movement, we are ready to work with you and listen to your opinions and suggestions. In this context, I would like to express my gratitude wishing this conference to open a new horizon and contribute to the solution. Zubeyir Aydar, 6 December 2018.
Ja, vielen Dank, liebe Dersim. Wir sind natürlich alle sehr berührt auch von dem Beitrag und bedauern es natürlich, dass er nicht unter uns sein kann aufgrund dieser Situation. Vielen Dank auch an alle Referentinnen und Referenten für ihre verschiedenen Beiträge. Die Konfliktlage ist sehr, sehr vielfältig und es gibt unterschiedliche Auswertungen, die alle ja im Gesamtzusammenhang stehen. Und wir gehen jetzt über in den Diskussionsteil, wo Sie Möglichkeiten haben, wo ihr Möglichkeiten habt, konkret auch Fragen zu den einzelnen Beiträgen an die jeweiligen Redner zu stellen. Ja. Genau, wir fangen hier vorne an.
I have a general question about the Mr. Aydar. Mr. Aydar is recognized already for a long time as a political refugee in the Belgian state. He has been several times visiting these buildings of the European Parliament. We all know that he is playing an important role in the Kurdistan liberation movement. What is actually the source that prohibited him of entering this building? Was this explained? Is it the Belgian police that say they cannot guarantee his safety in the parliament? Is it the European Parliament authorities that say that he himself personally is a threat to the people in the parliament? Are it Belgian political authorities that say that he is actually a threat of the good relationship between the Belgian state and the Turkish state? Can you explain more about that?
Ja, vielen Dank für die Frage. Herr Aydar hat, wie Sie schon zu Recht sagen, einige Male, zuletzt vor 2 Jahren, auf diesem Podium gesessen und seine Ansichten bzw. die Ansichten der kurdischen Freiheitsbewegung für eine politische Lösung der kurdischen Frage und Demokratie im Mittleren Osten geteilt. Noch mal kurz zum Prozess. Wie ich angangs erwähnt hatte, ist es so, dass wir Herrn Aydar auf die Akkreditierungsliste gesetzt haben, die wir beim Europäischen Parlament eingereicht haben. Und es wurde uns bis gestern Morgen keinerlei Aussagen bezüglich dieser Liste gemacht. Gestern Morgen, als wir dann gemeinsam mit Herrn Aydar vor dem Parlament standen, wurde uns lediglich von Mitarbeitern eines Abgeordneten mitgeteilt, der übrigens für die Austeilung dieser Badges, die Sie bekommen haben, zuständig ist, dass Herr Aydar aus Sicherheitsgründen das Parlament nicht betreten darf. Nähere Angaben hierzu wurden nicht gemacht. Wir wissen aber um die Bestrebungen des türkischen Staates, eben diese Konferenzen zu verhindern und auch zu verhindern, dass Menschen wie Herr Zubeyir Aydar auf solchen Podien sprechen, die Ansichten der kurdischen Freiheitsbewegung für eine demokratische Lösung der Krise im Nahen Osten der Öffentlichkeit kundtun. Und um das zu verhindern, setzt der türkische Staat natürlich alle Möglichkeiten in Gang, so auch die diplomatischen. Es gibt keine schriftliche Stellungnahme bisher des Europaparlamentes hierzu. Es ist bisher ein lediglich administrativer Vorgang, natürlich aber mit politischen Konnotationen. Und wir alle, das ist auch in dem Beitrag ja gesagt worden, wissen um die zweigleisige Politik sowohl der Europäischen Union als auch des Europaparlamentes als eine wichtige Institution innerhalb der EU. Von daher ist das aus unserer Sicht, auch aus Sicht der EUTCC, eine politische Entscheidung, die hier getroffen wurde, eine falsche politische Entscheidung, die wir aufs Schärfste verurteilen, und wir hoffen, dass auch das Parlament in dieser Sache die Entscheidung rückgängig macht und diese Entscheidung als falsch bewertet.
Ja.
My question is to Dr. Bill Park. Bearing in mind the recent decision by the General Court of the Court of Justice of the European Union, what indirect implication will the Brexit will have for the Kurdish cause? And the second question is to our distinguished guest from Japan. I was expecting you to give more information about the previous works which has been done between the connections between Kurds and Japanese. For instance, I know of a PhD thesis written by a Japanese scholar about the Kurdistan Republic. It was done in Paris in 1980s, I think. And second thing, which is maybe very interesting for the public here, recently in Japan, a book was printed in Sorani Kurdish about Kurdistan Republic. It was done in Japan. And a little observation, I didn't see no word about America was mentioned in our guest's presentation. It was just about, for instance, the relation between Europeans and the Erdogan regime, but no mention of Americans' involvement in this chaos in the world. Thank you.
Okay, I'll deal with the implications of Brexit for the Kurdish question. I mean, first of all, if you're British, you know that this Brexit issue has taken us over totally. There's hardly any other politics going on. It's hard for me to say there's a direct connection. There is an interesting connection that people don't often make, which is that the UK, regardless of the political party in power, has for many years been very much in favour of Turkey's EU accession. You take the UK out of the EU, this is a voice for Turkish EU accession that is removed from the EU. Now, there's not a prediction involved in that, but the UK has been a consistent supporter of Turkey's EU accession. So it's a very indirect connection. The other connection I would make is, again, I don't know if it's really Brexit, but it is about this government. We have a government that is frankly not very interested in human rights questions at all. this applies not only to Turkey's relationship to the PKK and the Kurdish movement inside Turkey, but also to the Gezi Park crackdown, the Gulen movement, and so on. I mean, I personally have had a lot of arguments with British government representatives about this. You know, why don't they say something about something? And they won't. But you can find exactly the same kind of British policy towards Saudi Arabia, actually towards China, and so on. So we have a government that is just not interested in human rights questions and liberation movement. I don't know if this really answers your question, because to be honest, I think the Brexit thing has just become such a British obsession that we're no longer connecting it with anything other than ourselves. And I'm not sure there is really a connection, but there are these indirect ramifications. We have a government that is not interested in human rights. I would say not very interested in democracy either, personally. But, and we also, if Britain does remove itself from the EU, if that does happen, I think this might have some kind of downstream implication for support within the EU for Turkish membership, which will have a ramification for the Kurdish issue.
Die andere Frage ging an die kurdisch-japanischen Beziehungen.
I'm sorry, I can speak English not good. Therefore, Dr. Apo, he is good speaking English and Japanese. Therefore, instead of me, he answered. Okay? Thank you very much. First, about the U.S. 当然、アメリカはもっと支援すべきです。
プレゼンテーションの中で何で現れてなかったという、
プレゼンテーションの中にはアメリカのことよりもこれヨーロッパの議会なので、アメリカは入れてません。
It was my intention that my presentation would directly refer to Europe and Europe, Japan, Kurdish problematic. America didn't appear in my presentation. In general, I would say that America is having at the moment a relatively positive supporting stance toward Kurds. This support could be higher than it is at the moment, but it was my idea beforehand basically to talk about the responsibility and role of Europe in this problematic.
About the books, 本についてはこちらのエディターのもので僕も本書いてるけど誰も翻訳してません。
ここで
I'm sorry.
As far as the activities on the books which have been published here in Europe is concerned, I have myself written a book. It is there, and I thought the books which were published here are basically the problem of Europeans.
Thank you very much.
Okay, dann weitere Fragen?
Yeah, my question is for Bill Park. You did hint at an answer to this in your closing sentence, but nevertheless the issue is a particularly important one, and I want to ask you to develop this further. You said that Russia would have a dilemma regarding Turkey and Idlib at a certain point down the line because of its commitment, of course, to the Assad regime, and the Assad regime's clearly stated desire to reconquer the area, and on the other hand, the Russian desire you didn't quite say this, but I think we've discussed it also, the Russian desire to tempt Turkey away from NATO a little bit, and therefore to give Turkey a little bit of what it wants. I realise you've said you don't like predicting the future. Nevertheless, in your best guess, given the kind of centrality of this question, in your best guess, when that issue does come, which way, in your estimation, will Russia jump?
Okay, thank you. That is a really tough question, and it's true I don't like predicting the future, but we all do have to think about this. And I really do think it could be a big crisis down the road. I think what Russia would most like is that Turkey handles this question. I don't think Russia needs to be in a rush about it as such, but I think they would like Turkey to handle this question. So if my analysis of Turkey's capacity to do so is wrong, then Russia will get what it wants. But I genuinely think Turkey has a real problem in Idlib. It cannot control, it is not controlling the many of the jihadi groups, I'll lump them all together, jihadi groups in Idlib, and HTS is the biggest of them, and that's the one it's least in control of. There have been jihadi groups that have actually crossed out of Idlib into government-controlled territory. There was this alleged use of chlorine by jihadi groups from Idlib, which brought about a Russian air attack. There's shelling across the border. The idea there's a demilitarized zone that, on the one side, government forces, on the other side, Turkey is meant to police with these observation posts. There's shelling of government forces and jihadi forces across this border. That is going on. And I think a really big reason why for the jihadi, there's two really big reasons why jihadi groups, some of them have to, in a way, not abide by the agreement. One is a straight material one. HTS in particular raises a lot of money from either controlling the border crossings or controlling the roads that go nearby or through Idlib. That's where they get their money from. If they allow Turkey to fully take control over Idlib, which is what the plan is meant to bring about, they lose their main source of money. So I can't see how they can allow that to happen to themselves unless they really are going to give up the fight. And secondly, there is no indication that these groups want to give up the fight. They have not yet been defeated. And in many ways, what Idlib represents is a Turkish policy that has enabled them to keep the fight going. When the groups were removed from, expelled from, or by negotiation removed from Aleppo, Homs, Damascus and so on, they moved into Hama and Damascus, they moved into Idlib. So this is now where the groups are concentrated. They didn't surrender, they moved into Idlib, and that was the sort of separation agreement, which in itself is a declaration of their intention that they haven't yet given up and they want to keep the fight going. If they do give up, in effect, the fight against the regime is over because there's a concentration of forces in Idlib. So I can't see how they can give up this fight. So I think the initial pressure really is on Turkey to make this work. And I think Russia would rather that they could do that. But frankly, I can't see how they can do that. There are downstream implications for Turkey that I think are really important. I mean, one is, if I were one of these jihadi groups, whether it be HTS or Al-Ahram or any of them, I would see this as Turkish betrayal. Where do they go if they leave Idlib? I mean, one of the obvious places is to go to Turkey. And one of the obvious, or at least possible, not obvious, one of the possible ramifications is that when they leave, if and when they leave for Turkey, they turn their anger onto Turkey, which has betrayed them. It armed them, it supplied them, it protected them, and then if it takes that protection away, Turkey then becomes a really big part of their problem. So I think this is another reason why Turkey is really on the line about this. So, all of those are the complications for Turkey. Which way will Russia jump? I think ultimately, this is a problem for Western governments as well. I mean, we all recognise, even if we don't like it, we all recognise that the Damascus government is the government. I mean, it's the Damascus government that sends the ambassador to the UN, and when there are talks with Damascus, it's with this government, whether we like it or not. It isn't going to go away. I mean, just put the personality of Assad to one side. I personally don't think he's going away either. But I don't think this government is going away. So we are going to have to deal with it. And a government is perfectly within its rights to say the Turkish forces, and by the way, US forces, are not in our country by invitation, which is the case for the Iranians and the Russians. They have an unwelcome presence. So at some point, and everyone must want this point to, or at least Russia must want this point to arrive, that there are peace negotiations. The issue of foreign occupation of Turkish territory will be on the agenda. It will be put there by Damascus, whatever Russia wants. They do talk about it quite loudly anyway. They're not under control of Russia on this issue. They speak quite openly about their irritation, anger at the Turkish presence. It'll be very difficult for Russia, but ultimately I think that the Russians will talk to Turkey, they'll talk to Damascus, but the bottom line has to be Turkey is in occupation of the territory of a country friendly to Russia. And Russia has taken this role. I think they will have to jump towards Damascus. But they will try very hard to find acceptable terms under which Turkey withdraws, to enable Turkey to withdraw without losing face. How you do that, I don't know. But my instinct is to think Russia will side with Damascus at the very end of a very complicated process.
So, es geht weiter mit den Fragerunden. Ich glaube, Estelle hatte sich noch gemeldet, oder nicht? Okay, dann machen wir hier weiter. Und dann... Nee, ich glaube, sie war vorher. Okay.
Det handlar inte om samma fråga, en ny fråga, om det är okej. Det är okej? Ja. Salima Fahad heter jag och jag representerar Vänsterpartiet från Sverige. Kära deltagare, kära vänner, och tack snälla ni panelen för en mycket intressant inlägg från höger till vänster. Jag hör två olika perspektiv i historien från Mr. Ahmet och från Mr. Kinoshita. Det är så intressant, olika perspektiver från en kurdmedborgare och en japansk medborgare. Och just historien, kurdisk historia, det tål och upprepa många gånger. Våran historia, det är vi stolta över. Det finns all anledning, vi är en fredlig folk, att vara stolt över den historien. Och jag råkade vara en kurd och en kvinna. Just kvinnor, jag vill lyfta upp det i det sammanhanget. Kurdiska kvinnor skrev historien när de krigade mot det mest barbariska i historien, i modern tid, det är ISIS. Flickorna, kvinnorna, Japaja, de blev kända över hela världen. Vi är just en folk som vi vill ha fred. Och fredlig lösning, det är möjligt, Mr. Ahmed. Jag håller med dig, det är möjligt. Men förutsättningarna för att det ska vara möjligt, det ska vara ledare som sitter i fängelse i flera år ska befrias. I den här plattformen, i den här byggnaden som fattas viktiga beslut. Vi bidrar till Turkiet. Vi skänker pengar till Turkiet i samband med flyktingkrisen 2015 för att ska bevaka våra gränser. vad gör Turkiet? De bygger nya fängelser åt våra politiker. De använder det här kortet, lyfter upp den, hotar EU, hotar hela världssamfundet med det kortet. Det är där vi ska göra stopp alltså. Jag vill också beröra någonting som nämndes väldigt lite. Vapenexport. Jag kommer från Bashur, Kurdistan. 2004 när återvände jag till Kurdistan för att jag ska besöka mina släktingar efter Saddam Husseins fall. Besökte jag en liten by. Ha lite tålamod med mig, mina vänner. Besökte jag en liten by. Jag träffade en ung man. Båda händerna var amputerade. Synen borta. Så frågade jag försiktigt honom, vad är det som har hänt med dig? En ung man, men han hade glädje, alltså såg ändå positivt på livet. Ja, jag och en god vän till mig, vi rensade minor här i Kurdistan, sa han. Tyvärr, min vän miste livet på en gång på samma plats. Och det blev så här med mig. Efter många kirurgiska ingrepp, nu kan jag någorlunda kan leva. Vad var det för minor, frågade jag. Ni får lyssna. Jag skämdes som europeiska medborgare. Det var en mina som stod med en, jag behöver inte säga, någon europeiska land. De här vapenindustri i europeiska länder, bland annat Sverige, Tyskland och så vidare. De kan redovisa sina vinster i kvartal. Så här mycket vapen har vi sålt. Och de har vapen. Det finns i Mellanöstern. För mig, det är en hyckleri. Det är en dubbelmoral. Så vi måste se till att slut på vapenindustri, sluta exportera vapen till området. Till Mr. Bill, jag håller med dig. Syriakriget, flyktingkriset har varit stort alltså. Och just Turkiet, att använda flyktingarna mot européerna. Det här är ett spel som vi vet, vi som har bott i regionen i flera år, vi vet att vi är Kurdistan omringat av de här länderna. Det är Turkiet, det är Iran, det är Syrien. Vi är ett hot mot dem på grund av den rika landskapet eller rika landet som Kurdistan. Så det är inte så att Turkiet öppnar sina gränser för kurderna för att de tycker om oss. Nej, för att ska använda mot oss igen. Till Mr. Kinoshita, det var väldigt intressant att höra. Jag lyssnade på din tv-debatt igår kväll och jag blev så glad. Det var en nyhet för mig att vi har vänner från ena jordklotet till andra. Jag blev så glad för er engagemang. Jag blev så glad att vi har vänner över hela världen. Det var det jag vill säga. Tack för ordet.
Okay, vielen Dank. Es geht weiter hier vorne. Nee, dahinter. Mhm.
It's a question to several of you probably, and I'd just like to hear a bit more about the politics within Turkey, and particularly the economic situation within Turkey. How much has that forced them to turn outwards, as a distraction for their own people, and it's a standard thing, isn't it, to bring people together in a nationalist movement against an outsider to distract from the problems within the country, and how, when that turning outwards has all those problems which Bill so clearly outlined, what impact will that have on the internal politics within Turkey? So what future can we see for the politics within Turkey?
I'll take that first, yeah. Actually, I'm not sure about the economic driver. If you look at the way in which Turkey's been engaging, especially in Syria, it predates the recent economic crisis. And in some ways, I would go a little bit further and say I think at least a part of the driver was a sense that Turkey had become some regional power. It was an assertion of what they saw as a sort of neo-Ottoman, is the slightly journalistic phrase, but a neo-Ottoman regional assertive power that came from economic strength. And indeed, in its earlier expression, manifestations, it did have a strong economic content. The way in which Turkey engaged in countries in the region was very often driven by economics. These sort of central Anatolian traders turning up in Syria, and I saw them on the Turkish border, but in Iraq, and not least in Iraqi Kurdistan. So I think it's Turkey being assertive, more than they have an economic crisis and they need to distract. It's quite interesting when people ask me about the future of Turkey and the future electoral prospects. I don't know how much people in the middle of in Anatolia, the people that support the AK party, are really that interested in foreign policy. I mean, what you have to remember is they have very little alternative source of information. And first of all, people don't read that much; they get it from the TV. And the media is increasingly under the control of the government and peddles a government line. So I don't think they're very interested. There are opinion surveys that will say even the majority of AK party people don't like the refugees and don't like the engagement in Syria. I don't think it's what's really important to them. What's really important to them is jobs and so on and so forth. So to some extent, I think this is a sort of government activity, the engagement in Syria, rather than an expression of what it is that the electorate wants. But like actually more than most countries, you can always wave the flag and get a nationalist response. And I think when Erdogan stands up to the United States, or seems to be throwing his weight around in the region, Turks are patriotic or nationalist, they will respond. But I don't know how much it's really a big, important electoral factor for them. So when I look at how do you explain Turkish behaviour, I look at three other things. One, I think, is the personality of Erdogan. By that, I want to distinguish him from the AK party. If this had been Abdullah or Davutoglu or Bülent Arınç or somebody, I don't think this would be Turkish foreign policy. This is the way in which he has emerged as something over and above the AK party, almost now distinct from the AK party. It's about him and his assertiveness, aggressiveness, sometimes emotional response and so on. So that's one explanation. Another is, I think, an ideology that he shares and that is around him in this new Turkey. I don't want to use the term neo-Ottoman, I think, but it's partly that as well. It's this sense that there is a new world order of which Turkey is a part, of which it's a representative and to which it contributes, and it's to do with the demise or decline of the West and the emergence of Asian, Eurasian or non-Western powers. And Turkey sees itself as one of them, and this sometimes takes a Middle Eastern, sort of, if you like, Islamic form. We're part of the Middle East. It sometimes takes a Turkic Central Asian form. But sometimes it's simply pro-Russian or even pro-Chinese. So this is the idea that Turkey is no longer in the West and the West is no longer the place to be. We are something else. We are part of a new world order, and that is what we are asserting. And that all gets dressed up as well with this actually quite persisting belief or feeling in Turkey that the West would like to weaken Turkey. So quite often Erdogan will blame the West for supporting the Kurds as a means to weaken Turkey. And this has always been there. This is not Erdogan, this is an AK party. You used to find this under secular government as well. So I think there's an ideological understanding of a new world order and Turkey's role in it, and I think that drives it. And then I think there is a sort of deinstitutionalisation of foreign policy making. I mean, the military used to be quite important, and despite what everybody sometimes likes to say about the military in Turkey and elsewhere, they were often quite cautious. And indeed, in those early days when Erdogan was seeking to flex Turkish muscles in Syria, the military initially were holding him back. They were cautious about getting into a quagmire, and militaries often are. They want to know end states. They want to know what is it they're supposed to do and how do they get out. And obviously there's no clear answer to that, as I tried to demonstrate. And I think when the Turkish military still had the capacity to express a view in Turkey, it was cautious. But the Turkish military is being purged and is under the control of Erdogan. The foreign ministry as well has been purged of many of the secular or even Gulenist officials within it, and it is also now either not a voice in the way that it always was in the past, or simply reflects Erdogan's preferences because that's the way you get on, or because these people owe their careers to him, or whatever. So I tend to look to explain Turkish foreign policy, within the political system, and I think the electorate are almost bystanders or the audience, but I'm not sure they really drive it, either because they want it or because Erdogan feels the need to appeal to them. But, if he does something assertive and waves the flag and looks very Turkish, yes, they'll get very nationalistic. But I don't think it's very close to their hearts. They're much more concerned about schools, hospitals, jobs, and so on.
Okay.
In partial answer to your question about the economy, I think it's clear that the main reason Erdogan came to power and has enjoyed power so successfully is the economic good he has done to Turkey as seen by most Turks who elect him. And it is quite clear that in the past year or so, Erdogan's actions have hurt the Turkish economy, hurt it badly. And if Erdogan is to be removed from power or fall from power, I would say it's the economy that may well do him in. Now, as far as his Turkish adventures in Syria and other places, this is clearly a negation of traditional Turkish power policy since the birth of the Republic in 1924. Ataturk's policies of no foreign adventures. Turkey is filled with foreign adventures now, and indeed I've suggested elsewhere in my writings that if Turkey continues to have adventures in Syria, it may come back and bite Turkey. As you know, one of the Turkish provinces is Yildirim, which has never been accepted by Syria. Turkey took Yildirim, annexed it in 1938, and it is conceivable that Turkish adventures in Syria could actually backfire and lose this Turkish province of Yildirim. And third of all, it seems to me that Erdogan is pursuing a policy of destroying Turkish institutions so that he will have complete power. There's no longer even a Turkish prime minister. The office has been destroyed. Erdogan has gone after the central bank in Turkey, which is is supposed to be an independent economic institution. So clearly Erdogan is seeking to have even more power in Turkey, and I don't know how much further he can go, especially to the extent that it hurts the economy, which is the basis of his power. Thank you.
Çok kısa ekonomiyle ilgili söyleyeyim ben. Yani Türkiye'de ekonominin geldiği nokta, hani 2 yıl Türkiye Büyük Millet Meclisi'nde Plan Bütçe Komisyonu'nda çalıştım ben. Böyle son dönem uydurulan Andre Brunson kriziyle alakalı olan bir kriz değil. Diyebilirim ki Brunson'un bu krizdeki payı yok denecek kadar az. Şöyle bilinmeli, Türkiye özellikle çözüm sürecini, diyalog sürecini bırakıp savaş politikalarına direksiyon kırdıktan sonra başlamış, açığa çıkmış bir kriz ve yılların birikimi. Türkiye mega proje üretemeyen bir ülke. Bugün Türkiye'de üzerinden geçtiğimiz köprüler, tüneller, gittiğimiz hastanelerin hiçbiri ne halka ne Türkiye'ye ait değil. Tümüyle yabancı sermaye yapıyor ve garantiler verilerek ve bunların hiçbirinin ödemesi daha başlamadı. 2019 Nisan'da başlayacak. Şimdi böyle bir gerçeklik var. Yoksa şimdi sorarlar, Brunson gerçekten bu kriz, Brunson krizi bu döviz hareketliğinde etkiliydiyse Brunson 2016'da tutuklandı. Ya bu şeyin problemi değil. Alabildiğine sunni olarak ortaya çıkarılmış ve bunun mağduriyeti üzerinden bir kriz idare edilmiştir. Bakın normalde Türkiye'de genel seçimler 3 Kasım 2019 günü yapılacaktı. 1,5 yıl erkene alınmasının nedeni Türkiye'de ekonomik kurmaylarının tamamı bu krizden haberdar ve öne çekilme sebebi açığa çıkacak olan bu krizin etkilerinden sonra bir seçimi kazanabilme kabiliyeti çok zayıflayacaktı AKP-MHP ittifakının. Buradan hareketle bilakis Brunson krizi Türkiye'deki ekonomik krizin sebebi değil, onun daha kolay idare edilebilmesinin argümanı oldu. Çünkü zaten döviz fırlayacaktı. Biz bir şekliyle 2 yıldır tutuklu olan Brunson'un önce krizini çıkarıp sonra tahliye edersek dövizin hareketliğini biraz daha kontrol edebiliriz gibi bir şey. Sürekli mağduriyetler iç politikada arkadaşımız da ifade etti. Kullanılan bir argüman bugün. Bakın bugün ki bir gelişmeyi söyleyeyim. Yani önümüzde bir yerel seçimler var. 6 Aralık 2018 günü bugün Danıştay savcısı Türk Silahlı Kuvvetleri'nde türban serbestisiyle ilgili kararın kabul edilemez olduğu konusunda mütalaa verdi. Ve seçimden önce de muhtemelen bu karara bağlanacak ve siyasi iktidarın güdümündeki yargı kendi aleyhine bir mağduriyet ortaya çıkarabilecek karar aldırtacak ve bunun üzerinden de yeniden mütedeyyin muhafazakar kesimin oyunu konsolide etmeye çalışacak. Aynı andımız 5 yıl önceki bir uygulamaydı. Bundan 1 ay önce Danıştay sözüm ona iktidarın aleyhine bir karar aldırtarak yine buradan da aklınca Kürtlerin duygusunu okşama üzerinden bir iç politika malzemesi üretiyor. Yoksa kalkıp işte bir ülkedeki yapısal ekonomiyi getirip bir tutuklanmış Amerikalı din adamına bağlamak herhalde toplumun veya iktisat biliminin aklıyla alay etmek gibi bir şey olur diyorum.
So, es gab weitere Fragen hier vorne noch.
I'm sorry to interrupt the flow of the discussion, but at this point I would want to go back to our original question. Here we are discussing democracy, we're looking for peace, we're looking for dialogue in this chamber. I would demand, in the name of democracy and in the name of common courtesy and in the name of security, that the person or the persons who have responsible for not allowing our speaker in, Mr. Aydar, to come in this morning, that person in common courtesy would come to this chamber and explain exactly what the decisions are. Now, I know it's probably asking the impossible because we're talking about some sort of a democracy or we're talking about some arrangements. I wouldn't want to somehow compromise the whole conference, but we're talking about democracy, we're talking about dialogue, we're talking about engaging in things, and I think the least we might have is either now or in the next session that the person or people responsible, I don't know how one begins that mechanism, because we have this large body, so I would propose that we have an explanation here and now, not next week when we're all gone home and everything will be hunky-dory. I am just, yeah, so thank you.
Okay, wir versuchen das zu klären und wie wir damit weiter umgehen können mit der Situation. Es gab noch weitere Fragen. Ja?
Me. I'm Margaret Owen. I'm a patron of peace in Kurdistan, and I'm from the UK. And I just want to come back about the questions about Brexit and the UK. I'm afraid it's absolutely true that although we're talking about Brexit the whole time, we're going all over the world, everywhere. Where can we sell our arms and where can we trade? And it's absolutely appalling that although the UK was one of the key 7 countries that created the Arms Trade Treaty, that was 2014, which would actually prohibit the sale of arms to those regimes which actually breach human rights. We know we're just endlessly selling arms to Turkey. And I think that we, speaking for the UK, we're still, maybe for a few more weeks, members of the EU, but I think that we're the most vassal state to Turkey. It's extraordinary that when Theresa May was in, for the G20, was in Buenos Aires, and she had a talk with Erdogan there, all she talked about with him was about the Khashoggi murder, to investigate that. She never said a word about the appalling human rights and humanitarian law violations that were going on in Afrin and in Turkey. And it also, it was early this year that Erdogan was invited by our government to come to London, and there were very peaceful protests outside number 10 Downing Street. I spoke there in the afternoon, not knowing what had happened before lunch, when our mounted police, really doing Turkey's dirty work in our own country, actually brought the AKP, a little group of AKP, absolutely face to face with the peaceful Kurdish protesters, and at that morning 11 Kurds were arrested. We prosecute, or begin the process of prosecution, and it drops anybody who hasn't come back in a coffin, people who've come back to the UK, who've been fighting with the YPG and the YPJ, fighting ISIS, and when they come back they are told that they are supporting and fighting for terrorists. And in the House of Commons, Theresa May herself talked about Kurdish terrorists. Last week, I'll be very, very quick, but I have to say this because this is my country, and there was a meeting last week in the House of Lords, which I went to, which was the Associated Parliamentary Group on Women, Peace and Security. And thank you, all of you here who keep talking about the women and the extraordinary model that Kurdish women give for women all over the world, that you can have no democracy, no peace unless you have gender equality. But this was a meeting about Syria, Libya, Congo. The woman from Syria never mentioned, never spoke about the Kurdish women in the peace. She didn't talk about Kurdish women at all. And whenever there are meetings in our House of Commons with this associated parliamentary group or with our foreign of the Syria desk, it's almost banned. Every time I speak about the Kurds, the very frames on the outside the portraits on the Foreign Office walls begin to shudder and make a funny jangling noise. You know, we really have to talk about this, that the arms, this is unbelievable. I mean, yes, we sell them to Saudi Arabia, we sell them anywhere we can. Because of Brexit, we're absolutely desperate. So Brexit has, I'm afraid, actually increased our dependence, and we don't give a damn about human rights of the government that we have now. Thank you.
Okay, da die Zeit ja weiter voranschreitet, sind wir jetzt in der letzten Fragerunde. Gibt es noch Fragen aus dem Publikum? Ja?
A question for Professor Gunter. Last year, you declared here that delisting the PKK will encourage both Turkey and the PKK to renew peace negotiations, which have successfully would alleviate the Turkey long-standing security, political, economical, and social problems. Delisting the PKK might also encourage Turkey not to view Rojava and the PID-YPG with such a hostility, because once Turkey-PKK peace negotiations begin again, Turkey would also be prone to deal more peacefully with the PKK friends in Syria. This would also help lessen the US-Turkish quarrel over US support for the PID-YPG. Delisting the PKK would be a bold, imaginative move by the EU and the US that would contribute to the Turkish-Kurdish peace process. Now, we have seen this month, last month, that the current US administration, by putting a price on the heads of three important PKK leaders, is very far away from this possibility. They're going the opposite way. Do you have an idea what is influencing them to make this kind of decision?
Hello, am I on? I'm very pleased that you remember my comments and everything, and I still associate myself very much with it. I think what I said last year about delisting the PKK would be an excellent roadmap towards restarting peace negotiations between Turkey and the PKK. It's frankly not my fault that my government doesn't listen to me. But possibly if the Trump administration continues to flounder around in bad policies, maybe they will turn to other policies. Your question about why the U.S. has put a bounty on the leaders, these three major PKK leaders, I don't have any inside comments, although I will tell you at a conference I was at a couple years ago at an intelligence agency in Washington, I did argue about the delisting of the PKK, and they just smiled at me and said, I don't understand, and it's a done deal, and this is the way to go, despite what I've said about delisting the PKK. I don't know how serious the U.S. government is about the bounty on the three PKK leaders. I imagine if the U.S. government did get a hold of these three PKK leaders, it would hand them over to Turkey. But I think it's largely a U.S. sop to just try to make Turkey feel a little less hostile toward the United States. The U.S. doesn't particularly care that much about it. But yes, the U.S. policy, once it's set, the bureaucratic policy set against the PKK, it is difficult to change that policy. bureaucracies just don't change overnight, even though, this is the final thing I'll say, it is shocking if you realize that in effect the PKK in the United States were allied with each other. We're working together to save the Yazidis and other Kurds in Sinjar when attacked by ISIS in 2014. So there is actually a record of the U.S. and PKK working together, and I'd just like to see that continued instead of this stupidity of muddling through with failed policies that are leading us nowhere to other than to further failed policies.
Okay. Gibt es noch weitere Fragen? Ja.
This question, because there was a lot of discussion about Turkey not having an end game. What is the Americans' end game in Syria?
Help from the Japanese colleague here. A little known fact about my life. My mother was born in Tokyo, Japan. Escaping from the Russian Revolution, she got to the Russian embassy in Tokyo in 1918, where she was born. Well, where her parents escaped. Anyway, I do have this Japanese. I could tell my friend here more about that connection, but excuse me, I'm 75 years old and sometimes I wander. Again, Jeff, would you repeat your question?
What is the American end game in Syria?
The end game of the United States in Syria, you know who the president of my country is right now. So I'm not so sure he has an end game. I don't think he's as brilliant as he thinks he is, playing all kinds of sophisticated games and so forth. I hardly know that he realizes what he's doing there, other than he's got this vague idea that better than Obama, he somehow has to defeat ISIS. And that's his purpose, to defeat ISIS with minimal American losses. So he uses the Kurds in Syria to do that. And as soon as he's finished doing that, I think he would leave. So it occurs to me maybe the best thing the Syrian Kurds could do is not completely defeat ISIS, keep it out there in the cave somewhere in the desert, so the U.S. has to keep supporting the Syrian Kurds fighting that. Because I do think, and now I'm serious, that despite the magnificent Kurdish achievements in Syria, without U.S. support, this thing would go down the drain very quickly. Let's face it, it's U.S. military support, specifically air support, that has enabled the Syrian Kurds to be so successful. And when the U.S. pulls out, which will happen, then the Kurds in Syria are in deep trouble. So it would benefit the Syrian Kurds to keep the U.S. in as long as possible.
If I can just very quickly add to that, I mean, I agree with what Michael said, but if you go back to, I mean, the longer version of what I was going to say was that actually everybody is inconsistent, not only Turkey. Everyone's got themselves in a situation in Syria that it's not clear where they're going with it and what the end state is. But if you go back to a remark I made at the beginning, in a way, Syria is a playground for a lot of other stuff that is only tangentially related to Syria. I mean, for Russia, it's reasserting itself as a regional player. For Turkey, it's becoming a regional player. Trump initially was not in favour of any engagement much in Syria. You know, this came later on. So when you say the US, even who is the US in this? You know, is it Trump a couple of years back? Is it Trump now? Is it Trump in a couple of years' time? Or is it somebody other than Trump? So I think it's a dysfunction. I mean, Syria is a classic example of a dysfunction of the way the international system works and the way states work. They don't always address the problem that is confronting them. What they do is respond to concerns that they have that might be quite displaced and quite separate from that problem. In that sense, Syria is just an arena for a whole lot of other activities. And it seems to me nobody's really connected what it is they might want, if they know what that is, with what happens in Syria and what you do to get to that end state. There's so much disconnection. And it's not only about the US or about Turkey. I think Russia is in the same position, even Iran to some extent. So, yeah.
Can I have more questions?
Yes, please.
Hallo. Ich wollte ganz gerne eine Frage stellen.
My question is to Professor Gunter. I think 2 days ago, James Jeffrey, the special envoy to Syria, was suggesting that with the help of United Nations Security Council, that they will seek a resolution to implement no-fly zone over some parts of Syria. Was not directly telling east and northeast of Syria, but some parts of Syria, which I can read easily that it's the region controlled by the Kurds. How do you read these comments? Thank you.
Again, I emphasize that the U.S. position in Syria is basically against ISIS and then get out. Trump did criticize earlier President Obama for not getting more involved in Syria. But everything since he's become president himself indicates to me that President Trump doesn't want to stay in Syria any longer than ISIS necessitates. So, again, I don't think that the U.S. has any long-term policy towards Syria other than to, in the short run, handle the ISIS situation and then get out. And that is a negative position for the Kurdish situation in Syria. And I frankly think we ought to be thinking of what to do with Rojava and the Syrian Kurdish autonomous area once the U.S. goes, because that will be a existential problem.
Draufdrücken und sprechen?
Ja.
Ja, also ich hätte ganz gerne eine Frage an Mr. Gunter und Mr. Bill Park. Unsere Probleme haben ja, wie Sie alle wissen, vor 100 Jahren schon in diesem Land angefangen. Genau an diesem Punkt, genau an diesem Punkt in Syrien, im Nahen Osten. Und ich denke, das waren ja auch die Verträge von Sèvres und vom Lausanne, wo viele der beteiligten Länder auch, die hier anwesend sind und unter anderem nicht anwesend sind, auch daran beteiligt gewesen sind, wie es zu dieser Konstellation gekommen ist, dass mit dem Lineal Ländergrenzen gezogen wurden, ohne auf die die Hintergründe oder die ethnische Herkunft der Menschen dort Rücksicht zu nehmen. Und ich denke schon, dass wir einfach bei solchen Konferenzen nicht einfach den schwarzen Peter irgendwem zuschieben sollten, der jetzt verantwortlich ist, da eine Lösung herbeizutragen, weil wir alle wissen, dass das einfach sehr, sehr schwierig ist mit der ganzen Summe der Parameter, die dort sind, die unbekannt sind. Ich glaube, man sollte sich als erstes in der Europäischen Union vielleicht hinsetzen, und da sind wir hier an einer guten Stelle, zu sagen, was ist der Ausgangspunkt gewesen für die ganzen Interessen dort das ist ja teils auch besprochen worden, welche Interessen es da gegeben hat. Und da war der Fachvortrag aus Japan auch sehr schön zu sehen, dass man im Prinzip all die Elemente, die man hat, eben auch nicht einfach so an den Markt bringen kann und insofern keine ökonomische Sicht für die kurdische Lösung da gewesen ist. Aber da ist unter anderem auch die USA, auch Syrien, auch die UdSSR oder Russland eben auch stark betroffen, zu sagen, die USA habe ich deswegen erwähnt, weil NATO, ein bisschen Weltmacht, Weltpolizei, also da müssen wir uns weltweit global in die Verpflichtung sehen, einem Volk, was zig Millionen mittlerweile von einer Ethnie hat, zu unterstützen und zu sagen, wir ziehen das 100 Jahre alte Problem oder was noch älter ist, aber die Grenzen dann gezogen wurden, einfach nochmal neu auf und überdenken, wie wir mit vereinten Kräften aus den USA, aus England, aus der Europäischen Union und besonders vielleicht auch in der Schweiz da nochmal vereint gemeinsam kommen und sagen, was für Lösungen sehen wir. Und Mr. Gunter hat es ja gerade gesagt, wenn die USA sich zurückziehen, fangen die Probleme der Kurden dann nochmal untereinander an. Und ich denke, da sollten wir ansetzen. Und das würde ich gerne einfach mal in den Raum werfen, warum man sich nicht mal vereint an einen Tisch setzen kann und sagen kann, dieses Volk hat das einfach verdient, dass man sich dafür stark macht und einsetzt und die Historie betrachtet und nicht einfach aus der heutigen Sicht der Dinge. Denn wenn ich mir das Syrien-Problem heute angucke, sehe ich ein Problem, was wir vor 100 Jahren hatten. Vielen Dank. Vielen Dank.
I only wanted to add, we haven't asked the question really what outside the US government and famous policy groups, NGOs and so on. We have friends from the HDP represented in America, and we have also had visits from Kurdish friends in America, and we have links over there, so maybe we can find out, is the HDP, what do they think today, what the possibilities are in terms of effective interventions of any sort, if there are, which parties are responding, specifically apart from Trump, are there any other forces? Because, of course, there was a visit a week ago, or quite recently, in Rojava of one of the representatives in the American government. So it would be maybe quite good to pose these kind of questions. And then, on the other hand, we have a representative from the Syrian Democratic Council over there, Mrs. Sina Mohammed. So what is the situation outside? And I think, and also on the activist level, we have people over there. But as I said, it would be very important to assess also the present situation in America and the experiences of the Kurdish side on these problems.
Okay, in answer to that question, Estella, I don't want to belittle the activities certain NGOs and Kurdish representatives are doing in the United States, but they amount to virtually nothing. Okay, listening to this debate about what the U.S. attitude is, I would say one thing that would keep the U.S. interested in the situation in Syria is Iran. The United States, as a country, and President Trump specifically, are very bothered about Iran, very worried about Iran, and you all know that. And to the extent that Iran seems to be extending its power in Syria, this is a reason for the United States to get involved and continue to be involved in Syria. And also for my Israeli friend here, the United States foreign policy is greatly influenced by Israel, and to the extent that Israel seems to be threatened by Iran and Hezbollah's moves in Syria, I think that is something that would get the United States very interested in Syria to counter Iran and Hezbollah. And then finally, in complete counter-distinction from what my formal remarks were about the U.S.-Turkish confrontation in Syria, the United States continues to see Turkey as a long-term strategic ally, and to the extent that Turkey might seem to be in trouble by what is going on in Syria, I think that would also get the United States interested in Syria to protect its Turkish ally. As far as the Kurdish ally goes, that is merely tactical, temporary. It's not there in the long strategic terms.
If I could respond to the first question, I mean, as a statement of historical fact, it's very clear that the map in the region was drawn up by the great powers, most especially the UK and France. And I'm not going to excuse that. It's clearly the case. Actually, I was in Kirkuk on the Kurdish referendum day, and somebody came up to me and said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Britain." He said, "It's your fault." Okay, not my fault personally, but yes, I get it. The problem, though, is it's not. There's not much point talking about Britain and France. They happen to be the powers. You know, we have comedy programs in the UK about what did the Romans do to us. Right now in the Middle East, if Iraq and Turkey and Iran and Syria said, you know what, we're okay with the Kurdish state, I don't think Britain, France or the US or anybody else would object. The problem is the system is structured. Any system is structured in a certain kind of way. And it's structured by states, and some states are more powerful than others and have more reach than others, whether because they're in the location or because they're great powers like the US now and Russia now. And they can insist on their agendas, for good or ill, and they do that. And in the region, the problem the Kurds have is not only what was done to them 100 years ago, it was done to them. It's also the policies of the states that now make up that region. And as I say, there isn't, even if those countries were to change things, I don't think we would object. But they have power, and the Kurds without a state don't have power other than the power of resistance. I mean, that is a power, but that's the problem. I don't always like historical analogies, but I do want to try this one on you. We all study European history if you're a European, and I remember being very interested in the history of Central Europe, actually. And I remember studying the history of Poland, and for 100 years there was no Poland. There were Poles and there were Polish nationalists, but there was no state of Poland. Then one was put on the map. Why? 3 states didn't want Poland on the map. Austria-Hungary defeated First World War. Germany defeated in the First World War. Russia had a revolution. Once they were out of the way, the remaining powers, Britain, France and the United States, could say, self-determination, we'll put Poland back on the map, because nobody was in a position to object. And this is really the problem that the Kurds have. You have to either have a consensus, difficult to achieve, or the destruction of, or weakening of those entities, those structures that resist a Kurdish entity or Kurdish self-determination before it can happen.
I agree with what Bill said about Poland, but we have to remember one other thing: Kurdish disunity. Kurdish disunity was why Sykes-Picot was possible, and it remained. Kurdish disunity remains a problem today. So when you talk about a Kurdish state, what are you talking about? Certainly not a pan-Kurdish state. You're talking about at the most 2 possible proto-Kurdish states, one in northern Iraq and one in northeastern Syria. And that remains a problem that is unique to the Kurds today, as it was even more so 100 years ago.
Ich würde das ganz gerne noch mal beantworten, denn auch an Sie beide, meine Herren.
Scusate, stavo chiedendo la parola, ma non so a chi dovevo chiederla.
Ich würde nur ganz kurz, nur eine Minute.
I have asked for speaking. Yes, I have opened my microphone. Scusate, credo che ci sia un errore di fondo in queste domande e in queste risposte. Il popolo curdo non sta rivendicando uno Stato curdo, anzi ha fatto la propria esperienza nel nord della Siria proprio per superare questa concezione dello Stato e della nazione, per cui non ritengo che dobbiamo discutere se qualcuno vuole o non vuole lo Stato curdo. Lo Stato curdo non esiste e non esisterà perché il popolo curdo con la sua pratica sta costruendo un nuovo concetto e praticando il nuovo concetto in Rojava e in generale nel nord della Siria, insieme ai popoli che vivono in quei territori, quindi insieme ai turcomanni, insieme agli aleviti, insieme agli arabi. E questa è la risposta del popolo turco, del popolo curdo. Il popolo curdo non vuole né uno Stato né creare ancora il concetto di nazione che ha portato a tutte queste guerre. Quindi volevo chiarire questo concetto.
Very quickly, first of all, you have to be careful about Kurdish people. Actually, the referendum in Iraq was about independence. Although it was a non-binding referendum, it was an independence referendum. So there are different Kurdish approaches to independence. Secondly, and we know this from the British example, you can even see it in Scotland, in response to Scottish nationalism, we had devolution. That did not necessarily stop the demand for eventual independence. And I don't think that we can say, because any particular group of Kurds today don't want independence, they might not in the future, and indeed might not even want independence more if they have devolution. So if you're a nationalist sitting in Ankara or Baghdad, you're nervous about self-determination, even if it's only devolution, because you fear it might lead somewhere else. I'm not supporting that as a way of approaching the world, but I think it is a political reality.
Ja, vielen Dank an alle. Wir müssen leider aufgrund den Übersetzerinnen und Übersetzern pünktlich Schluss machen um 12:30 Uhr. Deswegen möchte ich mich nochmal auch im Namen der Organisatoren bei allen Referentinnen und Referenten für ihre Beiträge bedanken. Und jetzt gibt es noch einen weiteren organisatorischen Hinweis.
Yes, that's right, but it's the wrong time, so we have to finish now, and we will meet again in this room at 2:30 in the afternoon. Now we will have lunch together, so please wait in front of the conference room. We will go together to the restaurant for lunch. Thanks.